Ladies and gentlemen, could I ask you just to take your seats, please, and we'll get underway. We've got a very full programme to get through this morning. Gosh, that seemed to work. It doesn't often work like that. So, thank you and good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Graham Houston. I'm from Stirling Council, but here representing COSLA as the Vice President, and I'll be chairing this first part of the meeting. Could I just do the housekeeping bits first, just to let you know there are no scheduled fire alarm due to take place today, and the fire warning is given by the siren sounding twice, followed by a voice alert message. In the event of a fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the premises quickly but calmly to the nearest fire exit. Please note that the escalators and the lifts will not operate and must not be used during an evacuation. The assembly point, the muster point, is outside the Scottish Power substation, located in Mitchell Street, just next to the NCP car park. That's when you go out the front door and it's to your left. And the stairway 3 leads directly onto Mitchell Street down from the muster point. The routes for stairways 1 and 2 via the service entry yard through the pass gates in the main pen gates in Mitchell Street. And the refuge areas are located within each of the fire escapes on floors 1 to 5 and can be used by any persons unable to make their way down to the fire exit stairs. And the refuge offers any 1-hour fire protection, it's equipped with fire extinguishers and a call point mounted at a convenient height. And the facilities also, ladies and gents, and accessible toilets are located on floors 2, 3 and 5. That's the housekeeping. So I'm really delighted to welcome you to Glasgow on behalf of COSLA and our Scottish Local Government Partners Leadership event to just transition to net zero. And it's wonderful, I think, to see so many of you here today and so many others online. And to those who are joining virtually, we send you a very warm virtual hello and welcome. I hope that today's event will be an opportunity for us all to reflect and learn and to share the ideas and the path to net zero and to what that means for Scottish local government. So I'm sure you will appreciate that the safety and security of everyone attending this event is utmost importance. So the comprehensive set of COVID-19 mitigation measures is in place in this venue as well to enhance that safety. And I know that we'll all follow the best practice for staying safe and protecting yourself and protecting others importantly as well. It will help, I think, reduce the risk to public health and enhance the safety of everyone. So just to remind those of you who don't know that within this venue, face coverings must be worn by law unless someone is exempt from doing so. And you, of course, may temporarily remove your masks when eating or drinking, which is a pretty obvious statement, I would hope. Okay. So today is COP26 Cities, Regions and Built Environment Day. And it's therefore not a coincidence, I think, for us to be coming together on this specific day of COP26 to discuss how local authorities and their local and national partners can play their fullest role in just transition to net zero. And I hope that you'll be looking forward to hearing from a wide range of speakers today. They were representing COSLA, the Scottish Government and local authorities as well. And we'll also, I'm pleased to say that we're joined by Benoit Pillet, the Vice Mayor of Angers, the city of Angers in France, for an international perspective on this very important topic. And I'd also like to take this opportunity really to thank the Sustainable Scotland Network and the Improvement Service for supporting this event. Indeed, we're going to hear today from two members of the network, John Wincott, the Chair of SSN, and Professor Dave Ray from the University of Edinburgh. And lastly, of course, I'd like to thank the Scottish Government for supporting us as well today. And we're keen, I think, today to be not to be a one-way conversation, because a conversation generally is two ways. Otherwise, it's just a talk. So we're here for a conversation and provide a space for debate and exchange of ideas. And this is why, hopefully, over the course of this morning, we're going to have a couple of periods of discussion that we can share ideas and ask questions, etc. And that'll be an opportunity for you to ask our speakers some questions as well. So do please make sure that you share your thoughts and also your reactions, and those of you on social media and on Twitter, if you use the hashtag LocalGovScot, and our tag at COSLA in your tweets. So climate change, I think, is a challenge, and it's not one that we can face in isolation. We're here, we represent organisations, but we're all part of the answer. And we truly hope that today's event will both be a celebration of what we have achieved together and a reminder of what we've still got to do, because we're on a journey here, and it's a journey together for our planet. So thank you, good morning, welcome, and let me ask our first speaker, delighted to introduce my colleague and President of COSLA, Councillor Alison Evison, to say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning. It's good to see everyone here. I'm delighted to give my own welcome to this really exciting event today at the heart of the COP26 programme in Glasgow. Today's event has been very long in the planning, with admittedly a few bumps along the way, but it's fantastic to finally be able to bring colleagues from local government and beyond to discuss how to deliver on a just transition to a net zero economy. And it's great to see people, including some familiar faces, again here in the room. But I wish also to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us remotely. I echo the welcome made by Councillor Graham Houston to all our speakers today, and I look forward to what I know will be a very high-quality discussion. Unfortunately, I'll need to leave early to attend another event, but I will be very interested to hear feedback on the later parts of today's discussions. Local government in Scotland has a good track record at responding to climate change, and we are committed to the Scottish targets set for 2030 and 2045. COSLA itself has been very engaged in climate action for years and is committed to a just transition to a net zero economy. In COSLA, the pursuit of the just transition is becoming the goal which steers all our activity, be it transport, planning, housing or waste. Everything that local government does and delivers needs to address that crucial question, the impact on our net zero agenda. I'm also proud to say that we have not just pushed for ambitious targets, but for what has become the theme of this COP, the need to deliver and the need to deliver now. I know some councils want to move more quickly than the national targets, and they should be applauded for their ambition and for their drive. This is something which my colleague, Councillor Stephen Heddle, will refer to shortly in his video address. I'm also very proud to say that COSLA has been very much at the forefront in linking net zero commitments and biodiversity. COSLA recognises that we face twin global challenges, a climate emergency and a biodiversity crisis. These are, of course, linked and need to be addressed together. Councillor Heddle will say something in his address about the connection between nature, human health and our economy. At COSLA, we recognise that the natural world can help us to address wider outcomes, ranging from climate change to public health and a green recovery from COVID-19. Local authorities are taking steps to harness the power of nature at a local level. This is part of their actions to respond to the climate emergency, but also to promote well-being and enhance biodiversity. In recognition of this key role, COSLA signed the Edinburgh Declaration on Biodiversity, and we have produced a briefing for elected members on nature-based solutions in partnership with Nature Scot, the Improvement Service and the Sustainable Scotland Network, a great action of partnership. As committed as we are, we must recognise that the challenge we face over the next few years is truly unprecedented. Among other things, we need to lead the way in delivering steep cuts in emissions in major sectors like heating and transport, and to do this in as fair a way as possible. One statistic which jumps out to me, which encapsulates this whole challenge, is the need for 1 million Scottish homes currently on the gas network to install zero carbon heating by 2030. And we will need to do this and slash emissions from transport in the same period, just 9 years. As political leaders and senior officers, we have a responsibility for ensuring that we work with our communities on this enormous task, recognising that we don't have all the answers and we need to rely on the skills and spirit of everyone if we are going to succeed. Like we did during the pandemic, we will need to find new ways of working and the courage to problem solve along the way. All this while leading through considerable uncertainty. And of course, we will need more resources to achieve our goals and the skills to make use of them. How local government can be equipped to deliver on the just transition will need continued dialogue with Scottish and UK governments, and I am delighted that Richard Lockhead, MSP, Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work, is giving the perspective of Scottish Government today. In recognition of the critical role played by local governments in all their forms across the world in delivery of a just transition, COSLA has argued strongly for a dedicated local day at COP26. I'm pleased to say, of course, that we were successful, and the events happening across the city today will highlight different aspects of the work of local government. However, we must remember that as we approach the formal end of the summit tomorrow, high-level negotiations are happening just a short distance from here on the substance of COP26. We have tried to use what influence we have to argue that for all the reasons I have just talked about, the role of local government must be recognised in the final output from COP26. Put simply, no matter what is agreed from COP, local governments across the world will have a major role in ensuring that it is delivered. No matter the outcome of COP, we will continue to work with a broad coalition of local government organisations from home and abroad to ensure that the local government stake in climate change policy and delivery is recognised, including at future COPs. We will continue to advocate for a stronger reference for subnational, local and regional governments in the international climate change framework and in the implementation of national commitments. So, in the spirit of this COP, with a strong call to deliver climate action, I wish you all a successful discussion today, and thank you very much for the contribution that each and every one of you is making. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Now, Stephen Heddle, Councillor Heddle, who is COSLA's Environment and Economy spokesperson, isn't able to join us physically here because he's at another event just down the road. But we do have a pre-recorded a message from him. So I'm going to look to the team, and that should appear. as ever, gremlins in the system. So that's just having some technical issues. So what we're going to do is move on and hear from Richard Lochhead. Now, who's Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work. Richard, I'm afraid, is self-isolating, so he's going to come on screen. So I was looking forward to welcoming Richard. I remember as a young man at Stirling University. He's still as enthusiastic, I know. So if we can move to Richard's contribution.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay, and thank you very much, Graham, for that introduction. I'm surprised you can remember me being at university. It seems so long ago that I can't believe you can remember that. Can I just say good morning to everyone and start by adding my welcome to you all to this COP event at the Lighthouse, where many very important events have been taking place over the last week or two. I am sorry I can't be with you personally today. Believe you me, I would rather be with all of you at the Lighthouse in Glasgow. But it's certainly been a very eventful and inspiring fortnight at COP in Scotland. And I also want to thank Alison for her opening comments as well. I thought she made very good, powerful points, and I'll no doubt address a couple of these in my remarks as well. COP26 is an opportunity that we really can't afford to miss. We have to accelerate the world's transition from an unsustainable present to a greener and fairer future, and to secure commitments to emission reductions that are capable of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. And at the very least, it must achieve near-term commitments that keep that objective well and truly alive in the longer term. Now, you're all meeting in Glasgow, and as the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, we see it as only right that Scotland is at the forefront of the green revolution. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make changes in a way that will be good for our people, our communities, our economy and our planet, and we absolutely have to seize that. There are few better illustrations of the impact of local climate action than the COP host city Glasgow, a city which is committed to achieving net zero carbon by 2030. And Glasgow is a city that represents a climate mitigation progress, and figures show that CO2 emissions in the city area fell by 41.2% between 2005 and 2019, far exceeding the Council's target of a 30% reduction by 2020. Hosting COP26 in Glasgow has also been an opportunity to showcase Scotland's distinctive outcomes-based and person-centred approach to adaptation, as well as exciting regional initiatives such as the Climate Ready Clyde. The most recent analysis carried out by the Sustainable Scotland network of all Scottish local authority annual reports showed a 10% drop in reported emissions over just 1 year. So these impressive numbers are underpinned by innovation and action by local authorities right across Scotland. The Michelin Scotland Innovation Park in Dundee is driving forward innovation in sustainable mobility and low carbon energy. And council offices, a leisure centre and a care home in Clydebank are being heated by a large-scale water source heat pump scheme, the first of its kind in Scotland, thanks to West Dunbartonshire's council. And in the Western Isles, we have just one local authority which is looking to harness the area's renewable energy potential to become a hub of green energy production. Now, I could go on, of course, but these are just some of the actions that are being taken, and they're success stories that represent what's happening right across local authorities in our country. We have used COP26 as a platform to champion Scotland's conference themes of just transition and people. We have been sharing our approach to planning for a just transition and learning from others so we can drive forward meaningful progress in the coming years. A just transition is both the outcome, a fairer, greener future for everyone in Scotland, and the process that must be undertaken in partnership with those impacted by the transition to net zero. Just transition is how we get to a net zero and climate resilient economy in a way that delivers fairness and tackles inequalities and justice. We took early action in Scotland by embedding just transition principles into our climate change legislation. Our commitment to these principles is unwavering. We were also one of the first countries in the world to establish a national Just Transition Commission that advised us on the way forward. and we're now working to deliver on their recommendations. We are in the process of re-establishing a new commission with internationally renowned climate academic Professor Jim Skia continuing as its chair to help us in that task, and he will give us some continuity. It's essential that this process is co-designed and co-delivered. We have therefore committed to working with others to develop a set of specific just transition plans across regions and sectors affected. To support the plans, we have published the National Just Transition Planning Framework, ensuring that we have a consistent approach and recognising that change must be planned and managed at national level. An involvement of local authorities and other partners will of course be critical in the development of these just transition plans. And we've committed to delivering our first just transition plan as part of the forthcoming Refresh Scottish Energy Strategy. I should say at the outset, we recognise that the unlimited extraction of fossil fuels is not consistent with our climate obligations, and our focus will be on achieving the fastest possible just transition for the oil and gas sector, one that delivers jobs and economic benefit and ensures our energy security at the same time, and of course meets our climate obligations. So we're working with partners, communities and stakeholders to take forward a 10-year £500 million Just Transition Fund for the North East and Moray areas of Scotland. And we're committed to creating a skills guarantee for workers in carbon-intense sectors across the country and to empower citizens to engage in green participatory budgeting in their own communities as well. So these are all commitments that Scotland can be proud of, and we are determined to get this right for the people of Scotland, bringing all affected communities with us while learning from unjust transitions in our recent history. For over half of the emission cuts needed at global level, the responsibility lies with local government, states, regions and devolved nations like Scotland. Since I took on the role of Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work, I've witnessed how Scotland's local authorities are on the front line of the response to the climate crisis. During the pandemic, I also saw local authorities and other public bodies dismantling the barriers and taking innovative approaches and demonstrating an increased willingness and ability to work together because it really mattered. So we need to bring that urgency and creativity and flexibility to both our recovery from COVID and to achieving our shared ambition for a just transition. I've had discussions with COSLA about the just transition, and we have strengthened our relationship as key partners on our journey to net zero. The leaders of Scotland's local authorities have a really important role to play in the crucial period to 2030, as Alison was just saying, in the shared national endeavour to tackle the global crisis of health, the climate emergency and the biodiversity loss. Many local authorities are already going well beyond their legislative duties and leading by example with ambitious targets and delivering good headline emissions cuts. And we recognise that central government cannot and should not be the only communicator on climate change issues. Through the vast range of public services they deliver, local authorities can act as trusted messengers, more effectively engaging people within their sphere of influence by demonstrating their climate leadership and facilitating engagement with communities and encouraging positive public behaviour. Last month, on the eve of COP, we published a new guidance for local authorities and the wider public sector, supporting them to meet the increased challenges, but also grasp the very significant opportunities that we all face in the coming years. We know the next decade is absolutely crucial for achieving our global climate ambitions, and the guidance encourages leadership in the public sector and accelerated action to reduce emissions created by the public sector. So we're working closely with COSLA to support local authorities to take real action that will make a real difference on the ground. For example, we recently announced the 5 projects to be supported through our Green Growth Accelerator programme. And the Green Growth Accelerator programme provides a catalyst for public and private investment in low carbon infrastructure projects across the country. And we will use the Accelerator programme to unlock £200 million of additional local government investment in infrastructure projects to support Scotland's transition to net zero emissions and an inclusive economy. The first projects include the development of a hydrogen hub, the restoration of peatland and energy efficiency upgrades of buildings. So we have to learn from these Pathfinder projects ahead of a further rollout of the programme to local authorities next year. We're continuing to work with local government to reduce emissions, particularly in how they heat buildings and transport and procurement. These are not just government priorities. We know that these are areas that people want to see local government and public institutions leading by example on and practising what we preach. The importance of local leadership and partnerships between governments, local authorities and communities will be absolutely critical in the delivery of a just transition. So, if you look at it from your own perspective as elected representatives and officers in our local communities, we are using this just transition as we go towards net zero as a big opportunity, as a window of opportunity to tackle inequalities in our society, to tackle poverty, as well as to create new green jobs in our local communities. So we're all in this together, and I very much welcome the opportunity this event brings. With the eyes of the world on Glasgow, we are coming together, both in person and virtually, to showcase the innovations and successes happening at local and regional levels across Scotland, and to share the collective challenges we all face as well to achieve that goal of achieving a net zero society and going through a just transition and supporting people and bringing our citizens and local communities with us on this very challenging but very important journey as we all play a role in saving the planet and humankind. So I look forward to the panel discussions and hearing more about your experiences for the next hour or so as I attend this event with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard, for that contribution. And I'm delighted that you can stay with us for the panel discussion as well. And we hope, of course, that you're staying and keeping safe. Can I just ask, have we got Councillor Heddle's? I think we're ready to go with that. So we're here now from Councillor Heddle, who, as I say, is the COSLA Environment and Economy spokesperson. So, thank you.
Dear Minister, elected members, colleagues, partners and friends, it's with great pleasure that I welcome you to the Scottish Local Government and Partners Leadership event, organised by COSLA and hosted in Scotland's Climate Ambition Zone. My name is Councillor Stephen Heddle and I'm COSLA's Environment and Economy spokesperson and a councillor for Orkney Islands Council. I'm also the Territorial Development spokesperson for our European Local Government Association, CEMR. I'm sorry that I'm unable to be with you in person today, but I'm very happy to still be able to contribute through this video address. Today's event is taking place during the COP26 Cities, Regions and Built Environment Day, the local government day that we all collectively asked for through COSLA. So it's fantastic to see such a good attendance in person and online. We're gathered to discuss local and collective national action on the just transition to net zero and local government's role in delivering on the international framework for climate change. We are the people who will deliver what is ever agreed in the blue zone just a short distance from this venue. But we must also remember that we're leaders in our own right in communities throughout Scotland. We want today to be an opportunity for exchange and engagement in the unique occasion of the world coming to Glasgow for COP26. Today is about creating space to discuss shared successes and challenges in our journey towards a net zero economy and society. Local government in Scotland supports an ambitious approach to tackle climate change and to deliver on the national net zero emissions target set for 2045. Local authorities in Scotland are working extensively on all aspects of decarbonisation and climate resilience, with many councils committed to and already having made significant investment to go beyond national targets and deliver carbon neutrality by 2030. Whether in pioneering wind, tidal or hydrogen energy, leading energy efficiency and renovation programmes, or increasing local resilience, Scotland's local authorities have a proven track record when it comes to addressing climate change. Internationally, there's no doubt that Scotland and its local authorities have an outstanding reputation when it comes to climate and energy legislation, policy and practice. COSLA has reasserted its fullest commitment to combating climate change, highlighting the seriousness of the issue and the need for urgent and sustained action. We've politically agreed to support the Scottish 2030 and 2045 net zero greenhouse gas emissions targets, and we recognise that we need to make rapid progress in decarbonising challenging sectors in the next few years. We therefore welcome a far-reaching agreement at COP26 in line with the more ambitious 1.5 degrees centigrade global warming target, and for that agreement to recognise the role of local governments worldwide in combating climate change. COP26 Glasgow provides a unique opportunity to showcase the high ambition and extensive work of Scottish local government. However, we live in a cross-boundary nature of climate and environmental threats. Scotland's a small country. As one of the birthplaces of the Industrial Revolution, we have a responsibility to show global leadership on this issue. And what we do in our local areas can reverberate internationally. Equally, as local leaders, we know that our communities are also impacted directly by global problems caused by climate change. The pandemic has shown that we cannot insulate ourselves from global threats and has starkly highlighted the connection between human health, economic well-being and the environment. Whatever the origins of the virus, COVID-19 is a message which we must understand and act on urgently. Scottish local government, together with their partners, has shown local determination throughout recent times and collective commitment to play our part in a sustainable recovery from the pandemic. But we also have a long-standing track record on supporting international agreements, and it's this work that I want to turn my attention to now. COSLA has, for example, been long engaged in the international process for climate change, attending various COPs, including COP21, where the Paris Agreement was signed. COSLA strongly supports the UN Paris Climate Agreement and its aims. But the need to recognise local government is more than just a stakeholder, key to local effective climate action, and the sphere of governance able to work collaboratively across society with local community support. This is important still today. In my further comments, I'd like to address three important questions, namely, why is COP26 important to us in local government? What do we need to see from COP26? And what do we want from here, and what should be the legacy? Firstly, why is COP26 important to us in Scottish local government? Well, COSLA has been for the last 2 years working with Glasgow City Council, our local government partners from the rest of the UK, Europe and worldwide to build a partnership that can have a strong presence at COP26. With a local day organised by former COP presidencies to varying degrees over the years, COSLA was keen to use its national role to engage with the UK government and successfully make the case for a dedicated local government day as part of the COP26 UK official programme. This was underpinned by our long-standing commitment to both climate action at home and to EU and international engagement, supported by COSLA's office based in Brussels. Our EU and international work led from Brussels continues, aiming to promote local government's role in the just transition abroad and vis-à-vis the UN Paris Agreement, as well as the commitments and actions of its parties. COSLA is part of a broader global coalition of local government organisations working to advocate for a stronger role for subnational and local governments in the UN framework for climate change, and importantly, delivery of national commitments set out in national reports, the nationally determined contributions. It's been important, therefore, to use COP26 to welcome our international partners to Glasgow, put our international partnerships to best use, and to ensure that the Glasgow Summit is a success with its role of local government recognised. So what do we need to see from COP26? Well, the UN Paris Agreement currently contains a reference to local governments in its preamble. It's widely considered in our constituency that a stronger reference for subnational governments in official documentation would strengthen multi-level government implementation of climate policy. This is important as 5 years on since Paris, it now comes down to implementation. For Scotland and the world to meet its ambitious carbon reduction targets, local government needs to be a key partner in climate change dialogue and plans for change. We have so much to offer as local leaders, providers of a wide range of key services, and as a political body with a democratic mandate derived from local communities. COSLA had hoped for a dedicated subnational chapter in the agreement reached at COP26 Glasgow, reflecting the role and responsibilities of local government, and the responsibilities that we have in delivering climate ambition in each of the UN member states. We will continue to strongly make this case throughout the remainder of this summit and at future COPs. COSLA later today has, for example, organised an international partnership event at the UN Blue Zone Multi-Level Pavilion, where collective advocacy, calling for multi-level climate action and horizontal cooperation between spheres of governance will be discussed among UK, EU and international peers. And what should we do from here, and what should be the legacy? Well, the success of Paris and Glasgow will depend on action and implementation, and therefore depend on inclusion for local governments in international climate agreements and their subsequent national climate plans, which is not just important democratically, but an essential mechanism for multi-level collaboration and delivery of climate ambition. We need to continue to work to increase visibility of local governments together with the communities in global frameworks and targets. And we also have an opportunity to make collaboration both at home and abroad a key part of how we do business and a clear outcome of COP26 for Scottish local government. This event today, for example, is targeted for Scottish local government, and we have strong support and collaboration through our partners, the Sustainable Scotland Network, or SSN. But we can in future look at new ways for EU and international cooperation, which is particularly important in managing the cross-border challenges. Scottish local government recognises global warming as a significant threat to peaceful and prosperous life for our communities. But we also have an exciting opportunity to work with others to build on a wide range of innovative work streams with multiple economic, social and health benefits to citizens in Scotland and beyond. Congratulations to Glasgow City Council, Scottish Government and UK COP26 presidency for making COP26 so far a success in difficult circumstances. COSLA, the National Government Association in Scotland, is working to do its part by engaging extensively in the available opportunities and is pleased to organise this event for Scottish local government during the COP26 Cities, Regions and Built Environment Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm delighted now to ask Councillor Greg Hepburn from Glasgow City Council to say a few words as the host city. So would you please welcome Greg? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I know that most of you have now been in the city for at least a few days, and many of you live here full time, but let me just join everyone else in welcoming you to Glasgow and thanking you for your attendance, virtual or otherwise, at this most crucial of times. We're now close to the end of this conference, where the eyes of the world have turned to us, and we have played host to everyone from the poor to the powerful. But whilst COP26 will end in a few days, the climate emergency will not. Alongside honouring any international agreement reached, continuing the inspiring discourse held across our city and the world in these past few weeks, in raising global awareness of the plight facing our planet, it is imperative that all levels of government across the world take seriously the need for a just transition. And in Scotland, as we know, the bulk of that effort will not come from Westminster or Holyrood, but will come from city chambers, town halls and council offices across the land. Local government won't just be waiting for instruction from above in order to make a difference. Local government will need to lead the change in order for it to even have a chance of succeeding. All of us, from Shetland to Dumfries and beyond, will need to do our own significant part for this shared global crisis. Now, of course, this is something that everyone in this room already knows. This is why we have all come here and why we're all going into our budget setting processes and our futures in general, with an eye towards what innovations we can make and share with one another in our quest for a low-carbon, net-zero future. Indeed, most of us are probably also worrying about how we will both achieve that ambitious target and also manage or avert the impact that this could have on our local policies, services and communities. But these challenges and impacts also come with opportunities. In seeking a fairer, cleaner, healthier and greener Scotland, we are presented with several questions. For example, how can we take the opportunity to provide the jobs and skills necessary to capitalise in a net zero economy? How do we look once again at planning, master planning and investing in physical changes required to our public spaces so that our people can enjoy the social and health benefits of new, usable, green open spaces? How do we make public transport, cycling and walking a better, safer and increasingly more reliable alternative to cars? Perhaps most importantly, how do we take people in this journey with us? How do we capture the imagination of people who are potentially seeing their bills go up, their options diminished, and unfortunately, actions by large companies or governments across the world that would seem to completely undermine any personal effort or accountability in tackling climate change? How can we make someone care about cycling lanes if we're also building new roads to accommodate even more cars? Friends, we must have answers to these questions and we cannot be found wanting. In Glasgow, which is currently in the eye of global attention, for good or ill, our climate agenda has been thrust into the spotlight. We built cycling lanes across the city, invested in next bike stations so that people can make use of the public bicycles. We've increased recycling rates to record levels, and we've invested greatly in the planting of trees and preservation of wildlife zones across the city. And as cited by previous speakers, we've made serious gains in the last few years and intend to make so again, up and including and beyond, hopefully, 2030. Indeed, details of our own efforts can be found in the Glasgow Climate Plan and Glasgow Green Deal Roadmap, which includes many recommendations, ideas and visions for a plan that we hope will lead to net zero by 2030, and indeed it must. However, these recommendations and ideas are of a scale and difficulty that will require us to innovate and, frankly, to brace for impact like never before. We will need to harness every aspirational, transformative bit of energy and creativity we have in order to reach that goal and to do our part in the wider effort. It will not be easy, and being completely honest, it will not be enough. No country, no city and no council has all the answers about what a new economic and environmental model will eventually look like and how we can get there fairly. Some of our ideas will work and some of them will not. Some of your ideas will work and others will not. The key, therefore, to making sure that all of us succeed is in sharing what we know, sharing what we learn and sharing what we think. We cannot work in silos. We cannot wait for one council or one authority or one actor to lead the way and then safely follow in their wake whilst avoiding their pitfalls. If we want to make a difference, if we want the world to know we took COP26 and the future of our climate seriously, or more seriously, then we must act at whatever level we are able to and when we are able to. We cannot afford to leave it to the big boys and the big girls of the world to do it for us. Whether that is locally led solutions from communities and businesses, new practices in relation to environmental policy, or even just sharing feedback that we get from our citizens and staff and officers with each other so that we better understand policies before we implement them. If we do not do this, we run the risk of being slow to make any change, being timid in the face of tough choices, and of being beholden to the kinds of pressures that would lead us to decades of inaction and the ultimate sacrifice of our planet and the social well-being of its poorest denizens. Of course, that brings us to the topic of the day. How do we make this fair? This isn't easy, but it is an absolute requirement for our efforts. Frameworks and policies must be co-designed with equality in mind. Acknowledgement of the role that poverty has in the climate must also be addressed head-on. If people do not feel like they're included in our sunny view of the world that can be, or even the world that is, then they will not engage and they will not care. New job opportunities and prosperity must reach every corner of our communities in our country, not just the trendy neck of the woods where these policies and actions would have far less of an impact on the quality of life and indeed in reducing our emissions towards net zero. To put it plainly, if all you're worried about this winter is getting the heating bill paid, then the phrase global warming doesn't sound so threatening, despite the fact that we know climate change is not necessarily going to result in a warmer Scotland and indeed would impact on the poorest and most vulnerable far more than it would upon those of wealth and means. In Glasgow, we are looking at how we can retrofit tens of thousands of properties with new, cleaner and cheaper energy infrastructure. We're looking at a new metro system to better connect communities. We believe that plans like this are how you bring the benefits of a just transition to net zero Glasgow to the people of Glasgow, and how you make sure that they are on side when it comes to the fight for climate justice. I'm sure that these plans are mirrored in other local authorities, with their own innovative and exciting policies being considered and delivered across the country. Of course, the other challenge facing us all is how to pay for this. It is all well and good coming up with 1,000 ideas for making the country greener, but if it isn't affordable and manageable, it won't happen. If we don't find a way to pay for it, the cost of not doing so will eventually dwarf the price of inaction. So how do we do it? In our view, local government needs to be equipped with the borrowing powers to make these investments. We need the autonomy to make our own decisions. We need to be able to bring about the huge physical, economic and environmental changes that require to happen. And if we are to have any chance of reaching those global targets, this is a necessity. We need governments to unlock the financial instruments to support that. We need to be able to apply our local expertise to dealing with climate change in the way that only local authorities can. In conclusion, friends, we need support and we need to support each other. We have a small time frame within which to act, but the opportunity remains vast. So I'll end in this question. If we don't lead others to act, from our communities to our governments to each other, then who will? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Greg is also the business manager, and you could tell that because his reference to the budget was right up there at the beginning, and we all know the challenges that you face. I'm delighted now that we've got a European perspective, and I'm delighted to welcome and introduce Benoit Pillet, the Vice Mayor of the city of Angers to offer that European perspective on just transition to net zero. Mr Pilet is a member of the Council of Europe, and the city of Angers that he represents is about 300 kilometres southwest of Paris and has a population of just under 153,000. So look forward to hearing from you. Mr Pilet. Thank you.
Dear Minister, dear COSLA President, dear all, I'm going to relax. I'm terrified to speak English in front of all distinguished attendees. With the mask is better. This is the first time for me to practice English elsewhere than in front of my wall. And you know how it's important the first time. Receive the best greeting from the European Platform Network on the Mayor of Angers, Christophe Béchu. The largest network of citizens in the world is indeed that of mayors and local elected officials. With the networks will CG, Platforma, Cllr, Cllr, Scotland's network, and of course, United Cities of France, we have the largest community of engaged citizens that exist. This organization that brings together cities, local and regional governments, associations of cities around the world, and has the mission to be the unified voice and advocate for democratic local and regional autonomy. Good ideas are everywhere, and there is no need to recreate years of reflections when territories in Europe of the world have already experienced these actions. I am in favor of strengthening this agility by crossing our experiences, successes, and failures. We learn so much from our failures, and let's not be afraid to share them to accompany successes that, if they are not directly associated with our city, will benefit the common good of humanity. In the field of ecology, which I absolutely do not associate with a decline, we must rely on this tremendous ability that we meant to undertake. But people at the heart of our system and stop thinking short term. A sustainable ecology, far from being punitive or ideological, must be enter our cities through the example of virtuous investment. In Angers, in west of France, with the Mayor Christophe Béchu and my colleague in charge of the ecological transition, we organized a very broad referendum on all 300,000 inhabitants to define their 30 ecological priorities as widely as possible. They have been voted and presented, and now we are implementing these choices all more effectively since they have been developed with the inhabitant. Often in patience, our election deadlines, but we go too fast when we need go too far. So we are voted 200 million euros of investment for 10 years. I will try to come back to concrete example following our roundtable with bicycle, biogas, street lighting, urban forests, hydrogen buses, and a dialogue between elected officials around the world takes time, but then forge a strong community that becomes agile when there is action to be taken jointly. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote in Le Petit Prince, the time it takes to understand each other, but that by taking this time of mutual taming, only the essential came out of it. I have no miracle recipes, but I'm firmly convinced that the dialogue initiated during the COPs and then maintain. It's a guarantee of great changes in our climate policies with COSLA on all cities over the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Puré. Now, I'm sure you've got questions. I know you're just striving to ask them. Now, we'll have a couple of roving mics around, so if you just want to stick your hand up, somebody will reach you with a microphone. So, who wants to be first? Gentleman at the front. We'll have a microphone down here. Can you just say who you are and which organisation you're from? That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Finlay Carson, MSP. I'm the MSP for Galloway and West Dumfries, but also the convener of the Rural Affairs, Islands and Natural Environment Committee in the Parliament. We know we need to go faster and further, and we've got real issues in Scotland with homes that have very low energy efficiency. How can local authorities ensure that the planning framework can make sure that individuals and housing associations, whatever, can install the new types of low-carbon heating systems right now? Because we still hear of applications for ground source heat pumps, whatever, being turned down because they're in a conservation area, whatever. So how can COSLA ensure that the planning system is fit for purpose, which accelerates the rollout of this type of technology, but also balances that with protecting our our built environment, if you like, our heritage when it comes to that?
Okay. Alison, do you want to? Because it mentioned COSLA,
Yeah,
so I'll come to you.
I'll start on this one, though I know that other people at COSLA will be better to answer this than myself. But I think we need to use every tool at our disposal to try and accelerate our response to climate change, to make sure that we work together, we share ideas, and we ensure that we get the best results as quickly as possible. I think the words ringing in my ears at the moment as well are from my colleague from Glasgow about the importance of thinking about being just and making sure that everyone who is concerned at the moment about heating bills, that's their top concern, that they're also given the support they needed. Our planning itself, we need to make sure that the planning system is able to support those aims and targets that we have. We need to make sure that we work together as organisations to spread the message of delivery and the principles as well. And I think this is also a call for working closely with the Scottish Government and making sure that planning legislation and things in place are also very important. So I'll turn to Richard Lockhead, I think, on that one, because I think collaboration across the spheres of government is essential to make that happen, to deliver for our communities.
Okay. Thank you, Alison. Richard, you did talk importantly about the need for cooperation, and I'm sure you and your colleagues in Cabinet will have discussed just the challenges around planning and allowing for all this to happen. Anything you want to contribute?
Only to add that we absolutely have to work together in this. If there are issues that local government want to highlight to the Scottish Government, we are open, we'd welcome views. We all have to work together to knock down any barriers that are potentially going to slow down us getting to net zero or delivering a just transition. So also, I'm not the Planning Minister, but I know the Planning Minister is very engaged in all these issues and speaks to COSLA colleagues regularly. So we've got an open mind, and we just need to talk to each other and identify those barriers and then knock them down.
Thank you. Councillor Hepburn, have you the challenges you must face in the city of Glasgow in terms of planning and trying to retrofit some of these things must be enormous. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, and retrofitting it's expensive, it's disruptive to people. Sometimes people don't know what the benefit is for them. My own ward, Calton, we had the Commonwealth Games with the Athletes Village that was built there. I had district heating system, and there was teething problems in that to begin with. And but actually, we recently brought forward there was a citizens' assembly where people of Glasgow came together, representatives of the community, and made 15 demands of us as a council, and the 14th, and they went in order of importance. the 14th, so it was that we should build district heating wherever possible. That was something that people wanted. They've heard about it. They know the benefits of it. And to me, schemes like that, which bring more efficient, cheaper energy to people, is how you bring people along on the journey towards tackling climate change. And it's vital, because if you don't bring them along, it doesn't happen. And I think that in terms of planning, you have to have master planning and city plans and everything geared towards this being what you expect. And conversations you have with developers needs to be on that basis. And that's why I talked about tough choices and sacrifices, because the easy thing to do is to not force it if you want the development in. But I think politically it's important that actually that becomes the standard of what we expect as things like district heating, things like more energy efficient schemes. We have to hold out and force developers to think that way as well. Sorry to overspeak, but I was at the Sustainable Development Awards the other day, and some of the things that go on across Europe are incredible, and we really need to learn these things, because it's an open goal to some extent, as long as the imagination's there. But I won't over-answer, so apologies.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Peely, do you have any experience in your own city of having to deal with planning requirements and changes in existing legislation, which sometimes can act as a barrier to the kind of changes we need to put in place as a move towards transition?
It's a question for me. My God. French humor. It's I need some seconds to understand fully your question. I need to help my young expert to translate to me. Okay. I don't know legal borders. Borders as only human borders in Angers. We make two choices. Change our policy with inhabitants and make a lot of pedagogy with all the 300,000 inhabitants to make a referendum during 1 year, and after to ask a question to the government, to the prefect. Sorry. And after their first 150 choice, we will collect only 25 possibilities to make action during 10 days. The other choice for inhabitants are so ideological, and we prefer concrete action to change, for example, all the 40,000 street lights in LED with motion detection when human cross, to give 2,000 bicycle for students during 2 years, free for all students. A lot of other examples to transform the gas before in no, okay.
Thank you. That was a very detailed answer, and I appreciate that, to a very challenging question, and my apologies for that as well. Can I come back to the audience for another question? Gentleman over here. Could I ask, just as we get as many questions in, if we could keep the questions quite concise, if we can, please? Thank you. And again, could you just tell us who you are and where you're from?
Hello, my name's Craig Hatton. I'm from North Ayrshire. We spoke about planning there and legislation, and I think this is quite linked, but one of the barriers that is more difficult to overcome is current infrastructure and grid connections in particular. And how can we, as local leaders, and we've got the Minister on the call as well, how can we try and move that forward more quickly? I think we've all suffered from it. We've all, as councils, have got lots of initiatives, but we're currently on a 2-year wait for a grid connection for a solar farm. I was speaking with GSK, one of our largest employers. They're an international company. We need their investment to stay in North Ayrshire and stay in Scotland. 5 years in the making to get some renewable energy put into that factory, that plant. And it's a real risk that we could lose investment, we could lose jobs, but we can't move forward with reducing our own climate emissions.
Okay. Well, let's put that straight to the Minister, because it's a question about infrastructure. Minister?
Thanks. Can I just clarify, was the question about a connection to the grid? Just to...
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, yes, I mean, it's a very important issue, and as I actually happened to speak at COP briefly to the head of the national grid in the UK, and he was acknowledging that a lot needs to be done to re-equip the national grid in Scotland and the UK for net zero, because clearly if we're going to re-engineer our energy systems, then that's got a huge implication. And in Scotland, I think I said in my opening remarks that we're refreshing our energy strategy in the next literally a few weeks and months. And I'm confident that will be within this as well in terms of Scotland's needs to make connections easier. And, clearly the national grid and the transmission infrastructure we have in Scotland and the UK is going to have to adapt radically. Otherwise, we're simply not going to be able to, whether it's attracting companies and investors who need these connections, or whether it's just re-engineering our energy sector to decarbonise, we're not going to be able to do that in time. So that's just to give you confidence. It's a big issue that the Scottish Government recognises, and we're discussing with National Grid and others.
Thank you, and certainly thank you for the question. Without doubt, no change takes place unless everything is in place to allow it to happen in that kind of domino effect. And if somebody's saying this is urgent and we need to do it, and then we're saying, and it's 5 years, it's not urgent. Another question. Two here, lady down here, and the second row.
Morning, thank you. I'm Margaret Davidson. I'm the leader of Highland Council. And can I begin by thanking Greg? Thank you, Greg. If you'd like to come home with me, that would be absolutely fine. You get it. You absolutely get it. And I can see it's dominating your life. And so it should. So I thought what you said was absolutely on it. What I want to say, and this is for the Minister, I just heard it there. We've got to go home and say, how can we do this, but 3 times as fast? How can we achieve this? And there's a real local job for us to share with all our neighbours, to listen to what COSLA is saying, to all of that. We'll go home and we'll do our level best. But what we want to do, and Greg touched on it when he was talking about local autonomy for local authorities, this is going to be increasingly important, is not wait 5 years while we decide what we're doing. The urgency has to come from everyone, and that includes the government. There was talk there of the changes we need in planning. They are vital. When they come for the next wind farm, I want to be able to say to them, not that, okay, you've done an environmental impact assessment, but on this vast estate, which is making money for old rope, I am expecting that you can have to do this peatland restoration, these 1 million trees planting. And at the moment, I'm on a wing and a prayer every time I ask for that. So government needs to get right behind us now. Now. Also, what I'm asking Richard is, one, come to Highlands, find out what we're doing. Come to the Highlands and Islands. Kate Forbes is doing her best to pull together the regional planning that we need to do together.
Briefly.
Briefly. Oh, you said that.
I did,
Other
yes.
people have said that to me, but You know, but what I'm wanting Richard to do is realise that actually local government is going to do much of the leadership on this. And we need your help to get behind that, whatever colour we are. And what you get at the moment is Nature Scott's working well, doing what it's doing. Forestry Commission's working well, doing what it's doing and what it's instructed to do by the government. Get behind us to join this up and to be as productive as it needs to be. So the talk of climate change doesn't come from just yourselves. It comes from local government, because that's where we are and we need a hand.
Okay.
There,
Thank you very much indeed. Richard, it is that question about, as you said earlier, about collaboration and working together. And of course, we've demonstrated in a response to COVID just exactly how quickly we can respond, and what local authorities have done in a tremendous way to meet the challenge of COVID. So we know we can do this. We know we can do this. So how do we do this in our shared ambitions as we transition?
Yeah. Firstly, I'll happily take up the invitation to visit the Highlands and Islands from Margaret, and look forward to that. And also, I welcome the point of urgency, because it is absolutely urgent, and I totally agree with that. And rest assured, the government's on board, and that is why we are bringing forward the Just Transition plans. So these are plans. These are to make sure we are addressing it, bringing everyone together, everyone around the same table in the plans. And as I said before, the first one is energy, which will affect every local authority in Scotland. And the rest of the world's very much looking to Scotland at COP. It's been intriguing in terms of how many people have approached myself or the Scottish Government to speak to us during COP, to learn about how we're doing it in Scotland, because they do feel that we're doing it more urgently in Scotland and that we're planning it. And that word planning is so important. But what's important here is we plan with not just central government, it's also local government, central government. We can't do this without local government. You're in the driving seat, and it's got to be a bottom-up approach to the Just Transition, not top-down. So happily come to the Highlands and Islands, and I do agree that we need a mindset. All public bodies have to have a mindset that this is the number one priority. We are in a race against time, and we can't afford any barriers to get in the way. And where government can influence that, we will, through our planning frameworks and legislation and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Minister. I had another question just here.
Thank you. My name is Dr.
Feel free to take your mask off.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Kate Crowley, and I work at the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute at the University of Edinburgh. I'm very aware that in order to meet a net zero transition, we also need to have a climate risk reduction or adaptation approach to this. Otherwise, we're going to invest in things that may get affected by extreme weather events in the future. So I'm just wondering how we can support local authorities to carry out those comprehensive risk assessments that are not being done at the moment, and that are really important when we're investing in green technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison?
And thank you. And just before I answer that, to lead on from what Margaret was saying as well, I mean, I think everyone in local government is up for the responsibility and is committed to the work, but that autonomy and financial and resource support from Scottish Government and UK Government and everyone else willing to give money is really important as well, to be able to fulfil that commitment and take up that responsibility and work together. And I think that leads into your question then, because obviously within that work as well, that professional support that organisations like yours and others can offer as well to local government is absolutely crucial. COSLA itself is totally up to talking to you and working with you and seeing on how we can develop solutions. Someone referred earlier that things will be tried, things will work, things will not work, but we need to try them, and we need to do that risk assessment and work through together. So there's officers here from COSLA, I'm sure would be delighted to hear from you and work on how we could work together in future. And if the local government has that autonomy and has the resources at its disposal and that professional expertise that your organisation can add, then I think we can move forward at the pace that's required of us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Other hands, gentleman at the front.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Good morning. I suspect this might be a rhetorical
Could you just
question.
could you just tell us who you are and who you're from?
Sorry, my name is Craig McCorriston from West Lothian Council. I'm actually the head of planning for the council. And I suspect this might be a rhetorical question, but we've heard a lot already this morning about the planning system and how the planning system must be engaged. As of yesterday, the Scottish Government published the National Planning Framework. That will be a vital document in terms of delivering what we are talking about this morning. How, as head of planning in West Lothian, can I be assured that that planning framework is going to give me the tools and the process to deliver what we need to deliver in West Lothian? Thank you.
Okay. I think that's addressed to the Minister. Have you read the document?
Unfortunately, I haven't read the document. As I say, it was published yesterday, but that will be a job for this afternoon.
I was going to ask you to answer the question as well. Is there, Minister, do you want to say a few words about that?
Only briefly that the National Planning Framework and all government policies are prioritising net zero, and therefore it should enable local authorities to expedite and take into account net zero. So obviously, please feed back your comments once you've read the document, and that applies to everyone. As I said before, the government, we're all in this together. We're not here to cause barriers. We want to hear back if there's more we can do, what we can do better, how we can work together. So please feed back on the document once you've read it, and I'm sure local government won't be shy in coming forward with any views.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I've got 3 hands up there. There's a lady there, gentleman at the back, and a lady down here. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce White, Western Bartonshire Council, and thank you for the positive comments about the district heating plant, and also can I thank the panel for some excellent presentations. My question really follows on from Councillor Hepburn's point about funding. In the Glasgow City region, we've worked as a region, we've carried out a feasibility study on retrofit, which would make a massive difference for the homes of over 400,000 people in the area. How can we encourage the funding to be available, because it creates jobs, it addresses deprivation and does a lot for our local economies? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Greg, do you want to?
I think that's the key challenge facing all of us, and I think we're both asking that question. Certainly, I think that the way to do it is to try and firstly, I mentioned about earlier looking abroad and looking beyond our normal routes for getting an investment in these things. And in Glasgow, I've certainly noticed a lot of new players coming into the city and looking to make investments and bringing these ideas. And I think we need to keep looking at that and keep bringing that in, because it also encourages the people here to say, hold on a minute, we're missing a trick here. And honestly, that's the route I've taken to it. More widely, how do we get more funding? I wish I had the answer to that to give you, but that's probably something that directs more in that direction of the table. But yeah, I think the key thing for me is trying to make sure that people, even who are currently doing things, realise there's a better way to do it that's got better results for all of us, and that if we engage with them more proactively and encourage them in that direction, then we're more likely to see those results. So that's how I'd approach it.
Thank you. Alison, we know that local authorities are waiting for the budget announcement from the Scottish Government, and flexibility in that is absolutely crucial. Anything you want to add to that?
Collaboration, partnership, recognition of the role of local government and the need to resource local government fully to be able to fulfil that responsibility is absolutely crucial. And certainty over the budget would help with long-term strategic planning as well. So that's a message to take back to ministers as the budget preparation is ongoing, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the gentleman at the back and the lady down the front.
Thanks very much. Adam McVeigh, I'm leader of Edinburgh City Council. I was really grateful for the Minister's comments about enabling councils and the powers that we need. And Edinburgh has a longish list of expedited powers in terms of transport and other things. I did want to just, because it's been a very positive discussion and that's a great thing, but there's a difficulty in delivering a lot of this. I've seen some really good quotes from Greg's colleagues actually about the fairness of road space when we get into transport policy and decarbonising, but not only decarbonising, looking at the fairness aspect of those who don't have cars and trying to reapportion space. But we're all kind of kidding ourselves as local government if we think that's easy or not controversial, or we're not going to get screamed at very, very loudly, especially in Edinburgh, where we have a kind of right-wing reactionary local press. I suppose my other ask of the government, and I suppose also collectively, is that we do work together and keep that positive. We've had some really great support from Michael Matheson in terms of the Spaces for People programme in the city, rolling out temporary cycleways and things like that. But we need that permissive legislation to be able to build permanent infrastructure quicker, that's better designed, if we're going to make that kind of transformative progress in the 9 years that we have to hit net zero. But just that plea that if we can keep that support from the government, and that's, you know, includes ministers really coming out and backing things that are quite difficult on the ground, because with the best will in the world and the best argument in the world, some of these things just can't eradicate the element of loudness that comes from it, and they're absolutely essential to deliver that net zero position. Transport is the biggest emitter in the city of Edinburgh. If we don't tackle it, we just won't make the progress that we need. So that's my plea and question.
Thank you. Let me take the question at that lady in the front as well, which will need to be our last one. There we are.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Ariane Burgess. I'm a MSP from the Parliament, obviously, and Highlands Islands. So I just really want to get that across, that I'm really concerned about rural and island issues. I'm also the committee convener for the Local Government Housing and Planning Committee, so we're very occupied with a lot of the issues. And my main reason for being here today is actually to really listen to all of the concerns, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the session. But I did want to say two things. One, on the National Planning Framework. So yes, it was introduced yesterday, and it's an unusual piece of legislation in that the government's going to run a consultation in parallel to our committee running a consultation. So please do speak to the government's consultation, but also respond to our committee consultation. We will absolutely want to hear from you. And I think I've been really kind of feeling very nervous about this framework, because it is, as it's been brought up, really, really crucial that we get the framework right, because it's going to set the direction for decades. And, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be doing a lot of infrastructure. We've got to get this right, and it's got to be, you know, there's a lot of getting it in the right place kind of things going on. So that's one bit of just really strong encouragement. Please do engage. I've heard from the Democracy Matters issue last week on local governance that people have not been engaging really. So I'm just underscoring that a lot. The other thing is that I'm trying to find intervention points. You know, so I hear, you know, the issue of being, you know, lack of funding. So what can we do? And one thing that I picked up, and I have had initial conversation with Councillor Evison about this, which is the whole empty homes issue, that we have 47,000 empty homes and another 44 unoccupied homes in Scotland. That's kind of close to the target of the amount of housing that we want to build. And I would love to just understand how we can take that further. I know that a lot of the empty homes maybe are not fit to even bother retrofitting, and some of them are not in the places of need, but it seems to me that that could be a very good intervention point, and it seems to me that we need to get behind training people properly. You know, I know we do have empty homes officers in some councils, but not everywhere, and I think bringing empty homes back into use is not just about, there's a skill in that. There's a skill, because why are those homes empty? Why have they been sitting empty for so long? So I'd just love to hear some thoughts, maybe from yourself, on the kind of whole, the potential for going for retrofitting empty homes and then putting people in them, rather than waiting until we can actually build new builds.
Thank you. Thank you. Greg, can I ask you just as briefly as you can, and then I'll ask the Minister just for any last comments sure. As well. Thank you.
Okay, sure. On that point, well, I agree. I think that one issue we have as a city, and I know it won't apply to everywhere, but we've got a lot of office spaces in the city centre which used to be homes and could be homes again and aren't necessarily energy efficient. And actually one of our objectives is to get more people living in the city centre and encouraging retrofitting in empty homes like that, or would-be homes. And they wouldn't appear in those statistics, but it's the same idea and principle as a vital way of both, minimal effort in terms of carbon impact, but actually will reduce. It doesn't mean you don't have to build anything new, you don't have to knock things down. So I agree with that. I'll pass back. Well, I did have thoughts on what Councillor McVeigh said, but I appreciate time.
Okay, thank you very much. And Minister, funding and flexibility. Anything just in closing remarks from yourself?
We're all going to have to be bold and fearless, Scottish Government, local governments, and we'll have to work very closely together given the scale of the challenge we face in transforming Scottish society and the Scottish economy between now and 2045, with very, very challenging 2030 targets as well to reduce emissions by 75% in Scotland. And in terms of Adam's point, I think that he makes a very powerful point, because this is where we all have to work together. And I was speaking to an event recently where I said, in the context of the massive changes we were discussing that society is going to have to go through, about how the idea a few years ago of putting a levy on workplace car spaces turned into an almighty national political battle. And I was saying, if these things turn into national political battles because of party politics, then where on earth are we going to get to with the big, huge changes we're going to have to make to transform Scottish society and Scottish economy? So I think that point, that dose of political reality from Adam is valuable, but it can be overcome if we all recognise that this is about saving our communities. If we don't take action and don't take radical action to transform our economy towards net zero, then the price we'll pay will be even higher. And therefore, I hope that all parties and non-parties and local government and Scottish Government and Parliament across society can work together on this. I hope COP26 taking place in Scotland and taking place in Glasgow shifts the dial, raises awareness about how serious this issue, and also influences public opinion at the same time. But very powerful points. Greg made a number of powerful points there as well. If we can all work together and be bold and fearless, we'll get there.
Thank you very much indeed. So, with that message about being bold and be bold and be fearless, that really brings us to a close. Can I thank you for your contribution and for being here today for this first part of the session, and could I ask you to join me in thanking all our contributors this morning. Thank you very much.
Right, welcome to the second session of this morning's conference, and thank you all very much for returning to your seats. We have an excellent panel again this morning. So we have Professor Dave Ray from the University of Edinburgh. We have Craig Hatton, the Chief Executive of North Ayrshire Council and the Solus Climate Change Energy Portfolio Lead. Easy for me to say, apparently. We have Councillor James Stocken from the Orkney Islands Council Leader, Councillor Mark Finn, Dundee City Council, and Councillor Adam McVeigh, City of Edinburgh Council Leader. I was just reflecting on what we've heard already this morning and what a really engaging, interesting conversation it's been so far. For those of you who haven't read the programme, I'll introduce myself. I'm John Wincott. I'm the Chair of Sustainable Scotland Network. Also in my day job, I work at Fife College on the estates team. So I am, in fact, the sustainability team at Fife College, which is great because it means I'm also at the sharp end of delivery as well as the more theoretical end, if you like. And it just occurred to me from some of the comments from the speakers and also the questions, there were comments such as the local authorities are at the front line, which is clearly the case, and that we don't have all the answers, which again is also clearly the case. And my personal motto, everybody who's heard me speak before knows I always say this, is hashtag collaborate or fail. And I was thinking that probably the SSN motto ought to be, if we had one, you are not alone. So I think there's a big feeling in the world, if you like, that local authorities are it. And clearly you are a big part of it, absolutely. But you are not alone. And this is where I think SSN has the biggest value to bring. It's a collaboration space. It's where we work together sharing best practice, as somebody said earlier. Also sharing the worst practice, because we don't all want to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And only by being honest, in an open, honest forum, can we ensure that doesn't happen. That's one of the things that I think people will find from membership of SSN, that there's an open and honest space. We share good practice, we share bad practice. We try and work together, build collaboration. Somebody said, we can't work in silos. Yeah, we cannot work in silos. If we keep working in silos, we're going to keep getting what we've always got. Clearly that didn't work, because we're still where we are on COP26. I saw a post the other day, how many COPs does it take to solve climate change? Apparently more than 26. I don't know. But, and also, the thought occurred to me that maybe people in the room are not fully aware of what SSN does, how we operate. So we are the Public Bodies Association, so any public body in Scotland can be, and probably is, a member of SSN. So we're hybrid funded by the Scottish Government, by local government, and also by NHS. And one of the things that we've delivered in the last month is working with the Scottish Government to deliver the new guidance on the pathway to net zero. So some of you will have seen it, many of you may have not seen it. It's an excellent document, even if I do say so myself. It's a practical document, and it's the first layer of tackling the challenge of net zero. And it's for all public bodies, and it covers working in collaboration, working together. And it identifies and defines some of the terms that we've all been struggling with. So if you haven't seen it, we'll make sure that conference organisers have got the link to send out to you as well, so you can have a look at it. I know we have a lot of senior people here in the room. It's a chance to talk to your teams and ask them how they're going to implement that guidance and what they're going to make of it. And also the politicians here, the councillors, you have a really difficult job. A lot of the easy tasks have now been undertaken. Some of the tasks that are coming up now will be less popular, let's be honest. And who wants to be an unpopular councillor? Not many hands going up, I suspect. So these are the sort of challenges we're faced with at the moment. So that was my 5-minute introduction. I'm going to make sure everybody keeps the time, even me, which, again, anybody who knows me knows that will be a miracle. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Professor Dave Ray, who will talk to us about really good stuff. You can say I'm well prepared. Dave.
Thanks so much, John, and I don't know if it's really good stuff. It keeps me awake at night. I guess the first session this morning was brilliant because it picked up on so many of the positives, but a lot of the challenges, and that urgency comes through. I mean, it's for all of you, you know, it's coming through so strongly through our kids in the schools. It's coming through from central government and the negotiations at the moment in Blue Zone. It's at such a crucial time. I mean, we know that COP26, like John was saying, how many COPs do we need to solve climate? COP26 is helping. And there's some, obviously, still a lot of work to be done in the next few days in terms of what Glasgow delivers, but it's already delivered some real progress. We will need many more COPs, certainly throughout our lifetimes. The next one is in Africa. That's, again, going to be a really crucial one. What I want to do, so I'm from the Climate Change Institute at the University of Edinburgh. You heard from my colleague Kate earlier making the point about adaptation being a key part of what we need to consider in terms of national climate action, but also definitely at those local levels. And that's been a big theme. At this COP, it's going to be a huge theme in terms of the Africa COP, COP27 next year. So where have we got so far? So hopefully you've seen announcements around things like deforestation. That was a crucial one because it had a lot of buy-in from the parties who are at COP26. So it's not part of the Paris Agreement, but you know, you see a lot of these announcements that are fairly niche. That one was a wide-ranging one. And that's relevant to us not because we've got big deforestation issues now here in Scotland, but we've had them historically. So we've got a lot of learning and of how we now address that in terms of increasing the soil and above ground carbon sinks. And one of the things also from the deforestation announcement was the understanding that these announcements have been made before and they haven't halted global deforestation. And the difference, I hope, looking at some of the detail from the announcement, is that it put people first. It recognised that actually, if you want to make this happen in terms of protecting existing forests, you don't just do it on an international level or a national level. Actually, you work with the communities who are already protecting those forests and looking at that local scale. And that's a message, I think, which really, echoes with all of you who are experts in this, at knowing that kind of place-based lens is how we do this. And if we don't take that lens, we fail. We've had other announcements around methane and coal. Again, for Scotland, we've got real history on these in terms of how economies can transition away from fossil fuels, but not make some of the mistakes we've made as a nation, the West has made in terms of the 80s and 90s and the scarring that that's had. So the just transitions, having Richard Lockhead on the session earlier was great, because that's his remit to make sure, so in my view, that as we make this net zero transition, we must make it, it's urgent, that needs to be a just transition. If we get to net zero by 2045 in Scotland, but we've made the same mistakes as the 80s and 90s, then that is worthless, that is unsustainable. And so, yeah, it's great that he was able to join the call. We've had some good announcements around finance, still not enough. Obviously, this is going to be expensive. The point's been made that this is not easy, but it's also going to mean a lot of investment. But it's a simple return on investment in terms of climate action. If we don't take action now, as we've heard, we pay a much bigger price in the future. So where we are with the nationally determined contributions and the Paris climate goals, so we are not meeting them, even if we, all the commitments through to 2030, which are the nationally determined contributions in most countries, that will lead to warming of around 2.5 degrees. And obviously the Paris goals are 2 degrees with the ambition of 1.5. We know that we've got some long-term targets like we've got in Scotland, 2045, and more nations have come forward with those. So that gives us some hope that the trajectory is changing and that 2 degrees is within reach. Glasgow is all about keeping 1.5 alive rather than delivering 1.5. And so hopefully what we'll see over the next couple of days is a Glasgow Accord or agreement which actually does keep that alive, looks towards Egypt next November in terms of increasing ambition yet again. And that's definitely what we need. The ratchet mechanism, as it's called, which Glasgow is the first iteration of, in the Paris Agreement, that's every 5 years, and we do not have 5 years. That phrase, maybe that's the strapline for today's meeting. We do not have 5 years. So just a couple of reflections on there. I guess from our perspective in Scotland, one of the things which has really come through strongly is that people they are looking to Scotland to actually show how it's done and also learn from our mistakes. And we're ahead of the curve a lot in terms of the thinking. Obviously, we have stretching targets. Definitely the 2030 target for Scotland is very stretching. And we're hitting some of the challenges that other nations and subnational bodies are going to face. So we should be, I think, honest, like John was saying, about where we've got things wrong and sharing the good practice, but also the failed practice as well. This whole COP, I guess all of you are about translating the targets, whether it's at a city level, a region level, for a public body, into actions. That's the hard stuff. And that place and time element, really, that those lenses really come in. So we've got that place-based element. I think in Scotland, that's a really good story to tell the world about. But that time factor, just in terms of how fast we have to move in different sectors. We heard about planning and we heard about, by 2030, we've got to do huge amounts of change in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of our domestic building, as well as commercial buildings. And, if things slow that even by a couple of years, then, we're in real trouble in terms of our targets and being Paris compliant, particularly with the context of COVID. That has made things even harder. So the clock is really ticking. I guess crucially through that place-based lens, like I was saying, we've got some really great practice in Scotland that we all know about. And it's very easy to kind of go, if you're having that chat with someone from another nation or from another organisation, to say, oh, look at this case study and look at what they're doing there. And that's fantastic. But this needs to be the whole of Scotland. That was point was made earlier on. So whole society and whole economy. So it's how to scale this up. And that's basically through, I think, local authorities, through local government, through businesses, through communities, actually all of them being empowered. We've got this wonderful situation in Edinburgh and Glasgow where we're competing in terms of our 2030 targets as cities. How can we get there? We've got, a lot of support in terms of really good councils and really good academics in terms of, I would hope, in Edinburgh and in Glasgow, lots of universities, lots of business engagement. We are not representative of the whole of Scotland. And if only the central belt deliver climate action, then Scotland will fail. And that's the story around the world. So it is really about, for me, so I should admit a bias because I love Sustainable Scotland Network, so SSN, but it's organisations like them that can mean this transition. Is that my time? Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
I will wind up quite quickly there. Just in terms of, so I was singing the praises of Sustainable Scotland Network, and if we think about making sure that that capacity at local government level for public bodies is universal in Scotland, then essentially we need the kind of things SSN does in spades in terms of that capacity building, that investment, the partnership, the support to help this happen for the whole of Scotland. I guess one of the things we've got is that context of green recovery that we need to deliver from the pandemic. We're in the climate emergency, we're in a nature crisis. The challenges that we've got to address over this decade in particular are huge. And like I say, that needs to be in the context of a just transition are fine. And those targets are all fine. We have targets around all of those. But like I say, people is what make it happen. So engaging them is the crucial part. And I think through communities, through local government, through listening, those climate assemblies, the citizens' assembly that was mentioned earlier, they're crucial ways of doing that. In terms of the Paris climate goals, the discussions in Blue Zone this week, they're not going to deliver on the Paris climate goals. They are going to give some great initiatives, some momentum, hopefully bring some of the slower moving nations on board. But there is a recognition down the road that actually realising the Paris climate goals, that's about communities, it's about regions, and it's about nations like ours and everyone within it, our communities, our public bodies, our local government, being empowered to deliver that. So fantastic to be at this event. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Dave. And our next speaker is Craig Hutton, Chief Executive of North Ayrshire Council.
Thank you and good morning. It's really good to be here today to talk about what is an immensely important subject, the most challenging subject we've probably ever faced for not only this generation but future generations to come. As we know, climate change has been the subject of discussion for many years. There's been a lot of naysayers along the way. There's been a lot of jaw, to paraphrase that famous saying. But now we're at a position where there's a general acceptance that this is real and the consequences of not doing anything are simply unthinkable. Now, more than ever, is the time. And I spoke about jaw, not war. But we're doing a lot of jaw, and we need to get into action. Not battle, but action. And it's really important we do that. But we all know the consequences. I'm not slipping on my slides here, sorry. We all know the consequences of short-term decisions. We've seen that over the years. We spoke about the 80s and 90s. The previous speaker spoke about those short-term decisions. We need to ensure that change is for the long term. It's the right change, but it's just. We all know that everyone is impacted by climate change. We all have a role to play. But our response and actions need to be inclusive. It cannot be the preserve of the few, the middle classes, the chattering classes. We must not exacerbate inequality in making the transition. We need a just transition. So the sustainable goals that we will be familiar with, a just transition concept links with 14 of those 17 sustainable development goals. Specifically, climate action, reducing inequalities, decent work, economic growth, affordable and clean energy. And we must ensure that we all have sufficient energy to support health, well-being and quality of life, which are all key parts of that sustainable development framework. Fairness. I think you've probably gathered by now that this is really important to me. I think it is important to us all. The pandemic has really shone a light on the high levels of inequality in our society and our economy. And our approach must be inclusive. How we measure success needs to be different. It can't just be around GDP. GDP is not sufficient to recognise the wider levels of economic, social and environmental well-being across our communities, nor will it provide the basis for change. We need that triple bottom line, socially, economically and environmentally, to ensure a just transition. Fairness, again, I've spoke around that. We've got to ensure it doesn't affect vulnerable groups. We need to ensure it doesn't exclude or become a burden on those suffering at the difficult end of society. Because we know Scotland does suffer from high levels of inequality. How can we do that transition? If we think about employment, gas companies employ a lot of people. We know that gas will come to an end eventually, but how do we transfer those skills? One of the lessons from the 1980s and the deindustrialisation was people were left behind. We need to take those skills and transfer into the new technologies. We know it will become at a cost, but people still need to have a warm home. And if you think about Maslow, the classic management, a home is the basis of that, and a warm home, so people can thrive. Again, inequalities, how do we close that gap? How do we ensure that just transition? You can see government's plan there. The pandemic has changed everything. There's a quote over on the left-hand side. I'll leave you to read that yourself. But a just transition means jobs in green industries, homes that are energy efficient, help reduce fuel poverty. Fuel poverty, a massive measure of inequality in society today. Infrastructure, transport and communities that support efforts to decarbonise, to enhance biodiversity, again, really important. But the bottom line for me is that the costs of change must not be a burden or even exclude those who cannot afford to pay or are least able to pay. We've heard from speakers earlier about the role of local authorities, and you can see from that graph there that the emissions from the public sector are actually pretty low. It's a really interesting graph, and what that shows is that we will not achieve this alone. We need to work with others. Partnership approach, collaboration. Again, we've spoke about it a lot this morning already, and we will continue to do so. How do public bodies, businesses, industries, organisations, and importantly communities, how do they all come together to help achieve that? Local authorities have a major role to play in that, because it's not only about the services that we deliver and the emissions from our services, but how do we take that community leadership role, that placemaking, to drive and influence action on climate change through the services we deliver, our regulatory and strategic functions, our roles as community leaders, major employers, large-scale procurers and social landlords. The President of COSLA spoke earlier on about local government and sphere of government, and it is about working at all levels, but the role of local government is really, really important and critical to this. Coordinated action to tackle climate change at all levels, internationally, nationally, regionally and locally, is absolutely crucial. My slides aren't syncing very well with what I'm saying. I just need to go back one, actually. So, businesses. I spoke about local authorities, but also businesses. How can they help? Well, we need them to embrace the principles of a green, fair and just recovery and implement them in their operations. Prioritise how they invest in low-carbon solutions that create jobs. Purchasing and supply chains. Avoid emissions-intensive companies. Look for that low-carbon alternative. Of course, we have to manage cost around that, and I'll talk around that as one of our asks at the end. But businesses need to use their position with industry to influence customers and partners to take action. As I've said, it will not be achieved alone. They need to work with other businesses, asset owners, asset groups, to deliver these, create and deliver green and just measures. It would be remiss of me not to mention North Ayrshire. That's where I work. I'm fortunate enough to be the Chief Executive of North Ayrshire, a fantastic part of the world. And I know we do have a few residents in here today, but it is a beautiful, beautiful place. It's on the coast, so it's at the front line. You know, rising sea levels, we will see this at our front door. As with many councils, we've declared a climate change emergency. Jaw. It's the actions that are really, really important. Absolutely critical. We're on our third iteration of our climate change strategy now because we've moved quickly. Not quick enough in my view. We are creating additional capacity. We've got lots of initiatives. Don't even start me on grid connections, as you saw probably from my question this morning, and we will all have those frustrations. And to be frank, I've never got a proper answer on that, even this morning. You know, we're not getting proper answers. We need to push that because we are not going to do the shift otherwise. It's just going to be impossible if we can't make that shift. North Ayrshire itself suffered in the 1980s from deindustrialisation. We've got high levels of deprivation, we've got high levels of poverty, we've got high levels of unemployment. If we don't follow a just transition, they will be even greater. And we'll see inequalities wider than ever. And North Ayrshire will be a bit of a testbed, quite frankly, for how we approach just transition. It is really, really important we get this right, and it's not the preserve of the few. We cannot continue to leave communities behind as we move forward internationally, nationally, regionally. We must move forward and take everybody with us and help those most in need. I've got a number of case studies. They're in the slides. I'm not going to go through them because I've only got 10 minutes. But they're in the slides about how we approach. The thing for us is that triple bottom line, economically, socially, environmentally. So, the ask. There's lots of asks in this room this morning. Many, many asks. We all know around that. What do I think the asks are in particular? Funding. Absolutely crucial. We all know the squeeze on the public sector funding, but it needs investment. It needs a commitment to long-term investment. We cannot invest for a couple of years, move on to something else. We've got to create certainty. Policy. And somebody spoke this morning, and I think it was Councillor Hepburn from Glasgow, about understanding policy before implementation. Now, that can't take too long because we need to move quickly, but we cannot be in short-term decision-making. We need to get it right, but we can't keep changing track and apologising for things that go wrong. Risk. And there was a lady at the front who mentioned risk for local authorities. And I'm really interested in what you say, how the university sector can help with that. Because we're all doing lots of things, but risks are high. How can we manage and mitigate that risk? And the final one for me would be about capacity. If we all rush out tomorrow and start procuring solar panels, the market won't cope, prices will go up, won't work. You know, quite frankly, it won't work. How do we manage capacity? How do we support innovation to develop the new technologies whilst managing risk? And that's where we all need to come together, share the learning, share experience, and we can make the right steps at the right time, but also, and importantly, ensuring that we achieve a just transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for sticking to the 10 minutes. That's excellent. If we can order that, we'll be fine. Lunch follows our session, so there's always a bit of keenness to make sure we don't overrun. So the next speaker is Councillor James Stocken from Orkney Islands.
Thank you very much, John. I think you're going to have to pull my leg or do something to stop me speaking at the allotted time, because, you know, when we start coming into this subject, it really is a thing I'm so passionate about. And if you, instead of listening to me, you could have picked up the Scotsman today and seen the front cover, the energy of Orkney. So I know that they're moving off the stands so quickly, I'll maybe have to stop sooner to let you go out and get one, but it's really important to do that. So that's the advert over, don't count that in my time, thank you. Because that would be terribly sad to do that. So here I am, from one of the most remote places in Scotland, from the smallest local authority in Scotland. So I'm going to come and try and share with you a bit of our story. But then when I thought about that, I thought, I don't like sharing stories unless they've got a good ending. A happy ending is the thing that we want, but there's great uncertainty as to whether we're going to have a happy ending or not. But our story goes back a long way, and maybe, do I need to press this? Yeah, I will do. Next. So I want to take you back to say why Orkney's been in this place for such a long time. And you can see that our first wind turbine here went up on a hill in 1951. That's before I was born, right? And I tell you something, it came down the next year because there was a gale of wind that was 120 miles an hour, if not more. And you may have called that a failure, but it's not a failure. Because on that particular site, over the years, we ended up with the first 3 megawatt grid-connected wind turbine. It's one of the windiest places in Britain. And if you want to test stuff, make sure it works in the extreme. And so that's where we come into our own, with people coming into our community, testing and trying. And you know, the UK dropped the ball on wind. It all ended up being put forward on the continent, and now it's come back. A huge opportunity lost to us because we didn't have the confidence to carry on. So there's a whole lot of stuff in here. I'm a dyslexic, so I don't read. So I know you guys are all clever enough to read the slides, because I've got so much to say, I'm going to have to dash through them. But we've got a whole catalogue, and this is not completely all the things that we could put on this. But some of the significant things that happened in Orkney was Harriet Watt came and studied island technology, and then that morphed into renewable energy. What an empowerer that was for us to be able to have an academic institution of excellence working in our community, and it caught fire. And we got wave and tidal, because if you put a rad map over the world and looked where are the greatest sources collectively of renewable energy, you would come to the Orkney Islands as one of the top, if not the top place in the world. Both wind, waves, and huge tidal resource all together in the one space. If we're going to do renewable energy, this is where we should be producing it from. the place where all these things come together. I've got to say, you know, as far as solar is concerned, we're just a little bit behind the curve on that. But nonetheless, it is a contributory factor to some of the stuff that we do. So we started to do some of this stuff, not just talk about it. And local authorities and local areas is where, you know, we used to say where the rubber hits the road, but it's where the wind hits the blade or the water hits the blade and makes the thing turn. We don't want to speak about doing things. We want to speak about what we're doing as we're doing it and bring other people into that understanding. So here we go beyond this one. Oh, sorry, that's doing a lot of different things. It wasn't me that made this up, I must tell you, because some of the things that happened, and there's a significant point on this map that's really important for you to understand. Our grid got full. Craig, I hope you're listening to this, because it's really important. Our grid got full. So the first thing we did together in Orkney, we came together, the academics, the council, the businesses, and the community, a quadruple helix of understanding in this place. And we went and we said, we need to sort this out. And Fergus Ewing came on board, but I'm afraid Fergus didn't manage to sort it out with us. We couldn't connect anything new to the grid because the grid couldn't hold it. But blow me, after a lot of persuasion, we managed to get, instead of 30 megawatts on our grid, we got 72. Because grids can carry far more electricity. It's just the fact that there's got so much redundancy and headroom in them, and we're going to have to work collectively on that for remote places where the production's going to take place to be able to export and do some clever things. Grids can carry far more than the regulator says, and I'll come back to the regulators because that's a huge challenge to us too. So in 2013, it was the first year that we produced more electricity than we need. But here we are in Orkney, you could say job done. It's not job done at all. We've got the heaviest carbon footprint of any place in Scotland. We've got the most challenging geography. We have got to move people by ferry, by plane. Our freight is more expensive. We're remote. We have the worst, among the worst, fuel poverty, as was mentioned before. And we've got some of the biggest challenges of any place. But from the worst to the best, what a chance to be an exemplar. What a chance to lead. What a chance to keep powering ahead, to show what can be done. And it's only done by that collective quadruple helix I spoke about. We call it Team Orkney. There's not many places in the world you jump in a taxi and the taxi driver starts speaking about renewable energy, but they do that here. I was sitting in the hairdresser and somebody was explaining to somebody else, you know, how the school's powered by hydrogen boiler and how it's produced locally. You know, it's in our community. It's not just the people involved in it. And if we're going to make climate change a reality, the public have got to grasp that and be able to run with it. So I better keep going here. I could speak all day. Right? So we as a council know our position. We've got to work with the others. We've also got to support market failure. We've also got to pioneer to make sure that we get the movement politically in all the areas required to make sure that we have a forward movement, because it's so easy to stall. It's so easy to give up. It's so easy, if you're blown down by the first gale, to never get moving again. But, you know, we all know what Robert the Bruce said, you know, if at first you don't succeed, you know. So we have so much here. And so moving on into some of these things, we kept leading our community. We kept supporting our industry. We kept encouraging our community to do the things they need to do, and we kept encouraging also where academia comes in so that we get research happening at the same time as delivery. So we set up an innovation campus. We went to, the Prime Minister came to Orkney last summer. I asked him to come because I said there's something that's far beyond us. It's beyond the UK. It's beyond Europe. This is a place that the world can learn from if we do it right. And so I need your support. And also, what I would say is really interesting, we have far more recognition for what we've done in this space from across the world than we get from people within the whole UK. We get tons of people coming, one lot after the other, to see some of the clever stuff that has happened. I mentioned our grid. There are so many other things we'll be producing hydrogen, green hydrogen from tide and from wind together from the surplus, and putting it into schools, putting it into vehicles. Our airport has now got a hydrogen boiler because they're looking to set off on this journey to net zero. We've got tons of tiny little things, but we are now getting stuck because we need to go into classroom 2. Classroom 1 is some of the early stuff, the bleeding edge. Somebody also said... Sorry?
That was the 10-minute warning.
That's a 10-minute warning. Have I gone for 10 minutes? Maybe I have. Okay, you'll give me a few more minutes to finish off, because it's not, the story's not finished. And this is where we need your help. We need your help because the biggest resource of Scotland is all around Orkney. And I don't know, the creator of the universe got it right, because he put right in the middle of all that resource, he put Scapa Flow, the largest natural harbour in the northern hemisphere of deep water, to be able to service that whole thing. We need to rethink, we need to support each other, we need to do the right thing in the right place to get the right result. Because if we don't, we are going to fail. And we are not going to have to scramble one against the other. This is not a race. It's not a competition. I was at the Arctic Circle a couple of weeks ago, and I just got this idea because I looked up in the sky before I left, and I saw the geese flying, as they do from the Arctic down over us. And they fly in that wonderful V formation. And when they fly in that formation, somebody takes the lead. And then, after a period, when they start to tire, they fall into the formation behind, but they don't go off the pitch. They all work collectively to get to the end of the journey together. If we're going to get somewhere with this, we've got to find our place. Not everybody trying to be at the front at any particular time, but we've got to take a turn in breaking what's needing to be pioneering into the future to make this happen. Local authorities in Scotland have a huge role to play in that. And what I will finish up by saying is, because I know my time's more than gone, I just wanted to tell you this quickly. See, we've got a test centre for aviation, where there's an electric plane in the other week. You'll hear this all the time, doing drones. We've got the world's largest 2-megawatt tidal turbine. The council have put forward 2 planning applications already, 3, to make sure we secure a cable. And the Scottish Government have sat on that application for a year without determining it and telling us. And if they're going to refuse it, they will need to be very careful that they don't break their commitments, because that's one of our routes to net zero. We're nowhere near it. We've got 100% electricity, but that's only 85% of what we use in the carbon economy. Before we go into agriculture and fishing and all of these kinds of things, there's a huge journey to go on together, but we can make it if we take one step at a time, if we work together. So I'll just finish up, because I had a whole lot of things to say about sharing failures. We're happy to share failures. We've had almost as many failures as successes. And when the British Antarctic Survey came to Orkney, they were delighted because we showed them our failures, because they need to know. We don't need to make the same mistakes. We need to actually tell each other, because this is not a race for one, it's a race for the world. We must move faster. Right? In fact, if we're going to get there, we've got to think smarter, we've got to act quicker, and we've got to deliver sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James, and really, really well done. And I didn't actually throw the bottle at you, but just for the other 2 speakers, if you run over, bottles. I didn't know we were going to get to geese. I'm going to steal that from now on, because I think that's a lovely analogy. We don't all have to race and lead at the same time. And also the comment about it's not a race, it's a race for the world. I think that's very, very apposite. Somebody much cleverer than me once said that the race isn't won until the last person finishes. And I think with climate change, that has never been truer. So all this race to zero, I think it's great, but it's not over till we've all got there. So thank you, James. That was excellent. Next, Councillor Mark Finn from Dundee City Council.
Good morning, and I'll do a follow that. That's probably the question. That's absolutely brilliant. I'm Mark Flynn, I'm the convener of City Development at Dundee City Council, and I've been asked to come along and just give you an idea of what we're doing locally in the transition. And you see from the first slide, there's a number of innovation we're actually looking at with regards to our Angus Cycling Hub, transition to sustainable transport. We've got the EV charging hub in the next picture. And following on from the Orkney visit, if you go down to the second one on the left at the bottom, that's our port where the Orbital Marine actually left to go up to Orkney. And I actually had the pleasure of actually seeing that. It was a fantastic construction, along with our electric buses. And I would be remiss not to mention Eden, down at the bottom there, Eden project, talking about coming to Dundee. So I've got control of this, don't I? Yes. So, like has been said before, most of us have got a climate action plan of some sort. And in Dundee, we passed this in 2019, and we declared a climate emergency. But a climate emergency doesn't really mean much unless we do something about it. And we have recognised the serious environmental, social and economic challenges from this. Along with that, the Council has agreed that we should align ourselves with the Scottish Government's science-based target of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. So the Climate Action Plan was compiled, working with a collaborative workload with the co-designed with public, private and community organisations, which is absolutely vital if we're going to go forward, because the Council can't do it all by itself. Any local authority has got to have work in partnership with everyone, citywide in my case, to reduce these emissions. And we've worked with universities, bus companies, RSLs, etc. And it says that in the slide, the plan was informed by baseline emissions inventory, climate risk and vulnerability assessments and strategic environmental assessments. It's lots of words, again, which the general public really are not interested in. They want to see action. And I think that's where the local authorities come into the fore, because they're on the front line. We'll have to produce these plans and we have to make sure we actually do things about it. Within the report, we've got 64 actions covering the 20 organisations under 4 strategic themes. And it's energy, waste, transport and resilience. And it represents the first set of actions that our local authority and partners will be looking into if we want to meet that challenge. So the challenge of, we saw a graph from the Chief Exec there from South Ayrshire with regards to what's happening with the emissions. We are no any different. We have 45% reduction in the last number of years, 16 years. And it's going to be a bumpy ride. We've actually taken the easy, the hanging fruit. It's the ones we can actually do without any problems. But going forward, the decarbonisation of our buildings and the decarbonisation of transport is going to become the priority for us. And we'll look forward, and we've got a long way to go to reach our target. In fact, we don't. We've got to do it as soon as we can, because actually setting targets is just a number. We've actually got to take action. And going forward, we've looked at a number of scenarios, and I think we see the bumpy rides that will be taken, and who this will affect has got to be taken into account as well, because the poorest in society will be the ones that are going to be reacted hardest. It will reflect on quite severely. So we've got to be quite careful what we do and what we actually produce. And that's the target. We've got to get down there. But how we do it is going to be a city-wide, in my context, city-wide cross-sector collaboration. So what we've done recently, this year, early in April, the pace and scale of the transformational change required to meet our net zero challenges requires this collaborative leadership and support across the cross-sector I've already mentioned. And this low-carbon innovation investment, behaviour change and ensuring we have a green recovery. So with this in mind, the Dundee Climate Leadership Group has recently been established. And this will provide leadership across the city to target Dundee's net zero challenge. And we're going to leverage expertise from across the city. As you see, there's universities involved there, businesses, action groups and RSLs, as I mentioned earlier. And we've got to inspire collective ownership and shared commitment from this. Our leader, John Alexander, is the deputy on that, and the leader of it is actually the principal of the University of Dundee. And in addition to that, we've actually set up a climate action team with officers in the last few months, and they're going to be actually doing our policy and strategies in the near future. So I've been asked to come along and talk about one particular topic, and that's transportation when it comes to Dundee. And we're actually proud to say that we are Scotland's EV city. However, that hasn't been easy. It's been a long journey. We started off in 2011 with 4 cars, Peugeot Eons, I think. And I think EVs back then were radical and very like minimum mileage, if you're lucky about 20-30 miles if you're lucky out them. Although we pride ourselves in EVs, we've also got to look at the sustainable transport measures within the city, in which it's a whole package, and we've got to make sure we actually cover that package: active, walking, cycling, etc. And it's not just one thing. So let's focus on the EVs. We've launched into the EV market back in 2011 with the 4 cars, as I said, 100% electric and the associated charging. We are now up to 170 vehicles within our fleet, and our goal is to, by 2023, have our council-run cars and our small and medium vans all electric by that point. But we've also got to support the EV transition, not just for the council, but for the city and the region. So we've also had to look at some innovative charging hubs within the city itself and the surrounding areas. So we've actually got charging hubs, and I think if you remember back to the first picture, you'll see the solar panels. We're actually on top of one of the charging hubs. So we look at strategically with the charging hubs, with battery storage, and this reduce the reliance on the grid itself. And I'll touch on these in a few moments. An example of what we've actually done here, we've actually got electric HGVs, which are our RCVs in the city. We just purchased 6 of them recently. We've got a couple of Cllr minibuses, electric Cllr minibuses, tongue-tied there. Electric Johnson large sweepers, small sweepers, etc. And we've got an ongoing replacement programme which will be carried out with a cost and condition basis. And these vehicles will predominantly be used in the city centre and our main population hubs, where we have a number of air quality issues as well, because one of the benefits of transitioning to EV is the benefit to the air quality and the benefit to the citizens' personal health. So just an example, as I say on the last paragraph there, we've got about 20,000 kilograms can be saved of CO2 by just one vehicle. So over our whole fleet of 36, and we have that change over the number of years, we expect to see 720,000 kilograms of CO2 saved just in this small transition. And just to involve the public in many ways, the names in the first bullet point there, Bin Diesel, Victoria Volt, Dr. Watts, this all came around from the schools, a wee bit of collaboration with the schools and the community, trying to get them involved, because part of the transition is to make sure everyone's involved in this. And taking that to the schools and coming up with these names, you see them going around the city, and people tweet them because they see so much fun in there. Now, we'll go back to the infrastructure. EVs, multi-storey car parks. A lot of our city, like many cities in Scotland, have got tenemental buildings. And to encourage people to transition to electric vehicles, we have to provide charging infrastructure for them as well. So we've actually looked at a number of options, and one was to choose to decide to remove parking bays within our multi-storey car parks and transition them over to solar panels with battery storage, as I said, within the actual complex itself, and take over some of the bays purely for EV charging. So to resolve this problem, back in 2018, our multi-storey charging hub project was awarded funding from the Low Carbon Travel and Transport Challenge Fund. And along with funding from Transport Scotland, funding support the increased proportion of low-emission vehicles in Dundee and Scotland's roads. And with the private ownership of EVs in Dundee expected to rise, and especially in general trends, we will see our demand increase with regards to what we need to do. 50% of the population don't have a driveway, and generally, and on-street parking or off-street parking is really quite difficult. So once we get these car parks, for example, transferred over, we're going to increase our hub numbers by about 60 charging points. And again, we've utilised solar and battery storage. And it's vitally important we actually take technology on board at every stage of our transition. But again, for tenemental buildings, what do we do for others who don't want to go to the car parks? Part of our research and innovation of office low-emission vehicles, who have been very supportive of what we've done in Dundee, as of the Transport Scotland. Innovate UK invested over £3 million in a two-phase competition for innovation projects. And as previously mentioned, housing stocks and tenements primarily in Scotland, and especially in Dundee. So the Clean Streets project allows us to pop up chargers. So they sit suppressed into the ground. This one here you're seeing on the slide is just beside the V&A down our waterfront. And when it's in use, you can use an app, raises up, you plug it in, you charge your vehicle. When you're finished, it goes back into the pavement. And it allows opportunities for residents, visitors and commuters to bring their EVs to the city. So after 3 years of making it a successful trial in Oxford, I think it was, the pop-up chargers are now installed within the city, and we've got 26 of them being trialled. So we as a city, we're always happy and excited to see and trial innovative ideas that can be introduced in the city. We've got a number of chargers throughout our network. Our hubs are quite innovative. We have a modal transport hub, for example. Again, it's about 22 chargers. But the advantage of this one is it's adjacent to a bus stop, it's adjacent to the railway station, it's also got EV bikes on it, it's also close to a new shared path we actually put down due to our flood defences plans to protect the city from resilience from the floods and rising sea levels. And it'd be remiss of me again not to mention MSIP, which the Minister mentioned earlier on this morning. This is a transition, as you say, from an old tyre plant where Michelin closed it down approximately 3 years ago, or started to run it down approximately 3 years ago. And with work from the Scottish Government, Dundee City Council and Michelin, we've actually transferred it into the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park. As it says on the slide, we're actually looking for low carbon transition, low carbon investment, low carbon research. And we're actually utilising this with Swarco, who are our Charge Place Scotland support network. They're based there. We've actually got a 2-day event, a demonstrator and showcase event going on there today and tomorrow. Again, highlighting the benefits of what we're trying to do in the city and for Scotland primarily. It's got hydrogen facilities. We've got a hydrogen refuelling station under tender at the moment, which will be sited within that site. And we've got hydrogen buses planned for the city as well with our local bus company. And again, it's all about partnership within what we're trying to achieve here. It's been mentioned a number of times today. The council can't do it all itself. It's got to work in partnership with everyone within the city. And we recognise the importance of actually doing this. So to achieve this, we've all targeted, as I said, the 4 main themes. But there's a need to work together, and that's fundamentally what we're going to get from all this. We'll have to work together to meet these targets as soon as we can. And local authorities will have a major role in anything we do. They're at the front line. They need to be supported by government, and I'm confident they will be. And I think that's the target we have to achieve. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I was just starting to reach for the bottle, but I saw your last page was sneaking in there, so we're fine. And our final speaker is Councillor Adam McVeigh from City of Edinburgh, and he's the council leader.
Thanks very much, and I will time myself just so that no one has to reach for the bottle. There's nothing worse. Edinburgh's right in the middle of the final iteration of our climate strategy, but of course it's not going to be the final version, because what we've done is built a strategy which can adapt as things progress, take advantage of new solutions, take advantage of opportunities to reduce carbon emissions even further. But it has given us a fairly solid starting point, I think, for the way ahead. And the reason I say we're in the middle of it is because in the start of October, we passed the first iteration draft of it, and in a couple of weeks' time, at the end of this month, we'll pass that final version. And that sets out the priorities and how we're going to be addressing climate change further within our city. Around 7 priorities, some very tangible, action-focused, with clear timelines, some very much a framework for the discussions that will need to happen to drive down carbon emissions in a city context. We've already put it out for consultation. 1,000 people got back to that. But one of the important things that we've done with our climate strategy, and I would love, as leader of a city as complex and relatively big as Edinburgh, is just have a 2-sheet paper that everyone can read, everyone can understand, and that's your plan for absolutely everything. Well, in reality, life is, and a city like Edinburgh is a little bit more complicated than that. So what we have done is made sure all our plans are aligned to the same timescale. So our poverty reduction plan is aligned to 2030. Our development plan is aligned to 2030. Our transport plan is aligned to 2030. And our climate plan is aligned to 2030. And all these strategies are speaking to each other and bouncing off each other. And we've talked quite a lot and heard in the first session a lot about a fair transition. And you don't get a fair transition if you talk about climate change in isolation. You have to talk about it, I think, in relation to poverty reduction. And it's only when you link those two agendas together that I think you guarantee yourself that fair transition, because you start from a motivating position of those two aspirations working in absolute tandem. And in a city like Edinburgh, that is incredibly wealthy, but with areas of challenge, with areas of poverty, where people have not had access to the amazing opportunities that have existed for so many other people in Edinburgh, that has been absolutely essential. Just last week, we had a climate summit organised in partnership with our Chamber of Commerce, trying to pull businesses together to try and understand some of the complex issues better, and also drive change, share knowledge and share contacts. And that was incredibly useful for the hundreds of organisations and individuals that took part. But that was our second summit in the city, because pre-COVID we had a youth climate summit from young people right across Edinburgh, hundreds of people meeting in our dynamic earth to discuss the issues and set out their challenges. And they are demanding, and as they should be, because it's their future, and as young as I pretend I still am, it's their future much more than it is mine even now. So these summits have driven change, have driven dialogue and discussion, which needs to continue to drive that kind of collaboration within the city. And it's not just collaboration within the city of Edinburgh, it's collaboration, as James said, on that global scale. I'm desperate to share our stories of success and failure with the networks, but also I want to learn from what other cities have done. That's what I'm really hungry for, and that's why Edinburgh signed up to the Marrakesh Agreement about climate change adaptation, so that we can learn from other cities and how they're engaging and addressing this. I think Edinburgh is the only city in Scotland so far and only one of 4 in the UK. But it's those sorts of, I'm not making a plug, I'm not on commission, but it's those sorts of networks internationally that can share best practice, contacts and the right kind of solutions to how developments will be taken forward. Our net zero 2030 target is obviously the second target that we've worked to, and while everybody's working to slightly different net zero targets, we all worked to the 42% reduction target by 2020. And Edinburgh was in a position that we were lagging behind on that, and we not only hit that 42% reduction target as a council, but we massively exceeded it, hitting about 60% reduction within that time. And that was driven, about half of that progress, by the way, was in just the last few years, because a lot of that progress was driven by waste and how we looked at waste and how we looked at it as a resource as much as an obligation. So we got rid of the archaic processing plant. We invested, along with our partners in Midlothian, in a new plant at Cllr Hill, which is a thermal treatment plant for anything that can't be recycled. So we've massively reduced, virtually eradicated landfill. We've massively improved our ability to recycle. We've massively improved facilities for the workforce that are engaged in those services, which is another issue. But one of the really exciting parts of that story is still yet to unfold and still yet to be told, because it's not only generating electricity through its handling of the residual waste, it's also producing heat. And that's the really exciting bit, because if we can decarbonise heat in Edinburgh and we can decarbonise transport, we've more or less got ourselves to a position where net zero is attainable. So it's that ability for us to pull together some of the energy sources with some of the new development, with some of the base loads that are already needed in our hospitals, major centres of innovation and private sector, that gives us a real opportunity to drive that forward. So that's one of the really exciting bits of that story. That's not just about the council's reduction in carbon emissions, it's about the entire city's ability to create sustainable sources of heat for communities. One of the things that we've done, similar to other cities, is made a climate commission. And I'm vice chair, chaired very ably by Sam Gardner from the private sector, and ably supported by our university to try and build that innovation and really create a mirror to hold up to the city. A mirror to hold up to the city on some of the things that are going well and share that best practice and get more buy-in, but also a mirror, I hope, in the years to come, to highlight companies that are not quite coming along with this journey and maybe just paying lip service to some of the aspirations that we have as a city, because it is important that there's an element of accountability. And one of the areas of terms of reference of that group is that kind of city accountability point. And I think it's hugely important, as well as the positive of sharing the solutions. I did want to go back to the Council's own climate strategy, because there are tensions in how we address carbon emissions. Most people who responded to our consultation said that they believed that the Council had permission to act, that, you know, stop talking to us about climate change, just go out and do something. And 85% of people support the vision and principles. I think something like 90-odd percent, 95%, I think, supported the aspiration of 2030 and agreed that climate change was an imminent threat. Just 9% opposed the vision and the principles in the action. But when you get to the actions themselves, it becomes a little bit more of a difficult conversation. So that number is still significantly high. 77% of people support the actions in our plan. But the opposition starts growing, and it starts growing in two ways. You get a cluster of people who say we're not going fast enough and the actions don't go far enough. And you get a cluster of people saying, wow, this is way too fast for me and I can't imagine my life in the way that you're describing it in terms of how I heat my home and how I get around my city. That's quite a difficult conversation. And although I could take solace from the fact that it looks like the vast majority of the city are with us and how we are going down, all of those people who don't buy into what we're doing is a challenge. It's a challenge for how that conversation goes forward, and it's one we need to lean into. And that's why the two summits that we've had, bookending COVID, are going to have to be much more of the approach that we run continuing forward, because it's that continuing dialogue, continuing discussion about how we face decarbonisation of transport. And for everyone that's here in the last session, my question was rather pointed as to some of those challenges, because there's no getting away from the fact that these are challenging issues. It's very challenging to start pedestrianising. It's very difficult to build cycling infrastructure in places that people were used to parking for the last 45 years of their life. These are difficult conversations that we have to have with our community, but we have to have them, and we have to have them honestly and openly, and be okay with an element of opposition, and be okay with an element, I have to say, of people screaming at us. Because unless we do, if we fall at the first hurdle, if we fall at the first soupçon of opposition, then we are not going to be able to deliver the really bold change that we need. Richard Lockhead earlier talked about the workplace parking levy. Didn't quite say that that was an Edinburgh ask that we were trying to get a few years ago, and did create headlines in papers like The Scotsman, dare I say, for quite a while in horror at plans that were being discussed. Now, I hope one of the real legacies of COP, and I've got a number of legacies that I'm going to take away from it in terms of the conversations and the solutions that Edinburgh can take advantage of. But one of the legacies I really hope that happens through COP is that we see not only that 95-97% of our populations who get that action needs to be taken, but they get the urgency, and they get that it's going to mean quite significant change for them, for their families, and that's the only way we're going to get an element of climate justice and a fair transition. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think next time I'll give all of our speakers a stopwatch. That'd be great. So we have overrun. Obviously my fault. I was chairing it. I was so engrossed in the conversations I didn't throw bottles often enough or quickly enough. So we'll just have one, maybe two quick questions. So has anybody who's not asked a question got a burning question they want to raise now? Please, I think it's fair to give it to people who haven't already asked. Yeah, lady here at the fourth row back.
Hello, I am from Glasgow City Council, and I just wanted to ask to the table, first of all, your examples are very exemplar, and they are an inspiration in different ways of how we have to tackle climate change and how we are going to achieve the net zero. When we go to deliver on the ground, we do face some challenges which you had named some, but I would like to see what is your perspective on how we are going to tackle, in addition to that, Brexit and the effect of COVID.
Thank you for the question. Dave, you were first in. I'll just take a couple of answers, so quick if you want to answer.
Yeah, I mean, great question because of the complexity of the context we're facing. And one of the things is good granular information and good models. And one of the things, so this is not a criticism of this panel or this event, but one of the things during COP is I talked about how we seem to be ahead of the curve in Scotland. But this is an all-male white panel. And actually, we're behind the curve right now in terms of some of the understanding, the people we've got in this room. So I've just seen a few of them. So Claire Warmby is an expert in terms of carbon scenario tools and taking into account some of the factors you raised. Kate, who spoke earlier in terms of resilience and risk and that aspect. This is complex and you need those different voices, that variety of expertise. We need the diversity of our expertise, but actually we don't represent the true diversity and strength of Scotland. So that allowed me to make that point, even though I stretched it a bit, so thank you.
Does anybody else want to just come in on that question? I'm not pushing you. Okay, one more question from the floor. Please, somebody else who hasn't asked a question as yet. Oh, do you want to come in? Jake on.
Sorry, I was too slow off the mark there. Just in terms of COVID and Brexit, Brexit has brought a real challenge to a city like Edinburgh with 62,000 EU nationals, but it's the supply chains that are really the issue, particularly in areas like construction. I think it will be a significant issue as we ramp up things like retrofit, and we're going to have to look at domestic, where possible, supply chains to try and mitigate that as much as possible. But there's no getting away from the extent of challenge in that. And I have to say, slightly political point, maybe just taking this, but I have absolutely zero confidence in the UK government sorting themselves out in any reasonable time to get agreements where that can be addressed. I did want to say, though, in terms of COVID, this is a very different kind of economic shock than happened in 2010. And the conversation after 2008, 2010 was how fast can we get back on the hamster wheel of economic growth? The conversation, even amongst, kind of very hard-nosed businessmen and women in Edinburgh, has not been that. They've understood the need to lean into the fair recovery and a green recovery. So no one that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to probably hundreds of businesses in the last 2 years, about COVID and the challenge that's been, and nobody's underestimated that, but they still want to come along with us on that journey. They still want to come along and reduce their carbon footprint and get themselves to net zero and help that greater city effort. So it's a very different conversation than previous major economic shocks, even though there's no getting away from the scale of the economic shock that there's been through COVID. But it hasn't come this time at the expense of the longer term aspirations that I think we've got as a country and as a city.
Thanks. I think, James, can you be brief, please?
I'll be as brief as I can. Yeah, both of those things are real enablers, I can see, in the most strange way. Because through COVID, we've learned how to work together across political spectrum. And if we're going to tackle climate change, we've got to take the barriers down. It's not a game between different groups. It's a real challenge for the world. And I would say that COVID has given us the ability to share right across the world in ways that we didn't do faster and quicker. That's really good. As far as Brexit is concerned, Orkney in 1939 had an invasion of people from the UK as we fought a war in the North Atlantic. Twice our population came as people who lived on the mainland, and we had 10 times our population living in ships. We're coming back into that place because the people that are coming to us at the moment on the ScotWind project round are international companies from all over the place. This is a place we can come together and we can undermine the barriers and we can work collectively to get a better outcome. And I think that the challenges of these things also become the opportunities of the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. An excellent question. So I'm going to have to close questions now. So just to let you know what's happening next, so I'll sum up, and then we're going to have a presentation from Planet Mark. They were due on at the break, but because of timing issues, then are going to be just at the end. And then it'll be lunch. So please don't all rush over to lunch just yet. So trying to bring all this together. First of all, brilliant panel. Thank you so much. Superb. We started off talking about COP. And I think Councillor Evison said, no matter the outcome of COP, we're still going to be doing what we're doing. And I think that was a really interesting observation, because we are, aren't we? Who here is waiting for COP to come up with this new statement before we do any more? No, I didn't think anybody was. And I've read the draft statement they put out yesterday. It's got a lot of urges, 9 of those, a number of invites, 7, notes, 5, recognises, there's a few recognises as well. There's only 2 decisions in the draft. One was to establish a work programme to urgently scale up mitigation ambition and implementation during the critical decade of the 20s. So, sounds like more blah, 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 is it? And the second decision was to convene an annual high-level ministerial roundtable pre-2030 ambition. So again, more talking. So I'm not feeling yet the move away from blah, 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 as Greta Thunberg calls it, to action. I'm just going to contrast that for you. Some of you may not have read the Climate Change Scotland Act recently. Section 44 is the bit that applies to public bodies. And it says a public body must, in exercising its functions, the word must, not urges or invites or must. And then it gives you 3 things as public bodies to do. Act in the way best calculated to contribute to the delivery of the targets for climate mitigation, carbon reduction. Act in the best way best calculated to deliver any programme laid before the Scottish Parliament regarding adaptation, and act in a way that it considers most sustainable. But this is a must. This isn't the Scottish Government urging public bodies to do it. It's a command. And yet, I've never come across a public body in any formal report saying, well, our Section 44 duties from the Climate Change Scotland Act mean that we are now doing this. I've not come across that anywhere. So for me, there's a big difference between ambition, discussion at COP, and even this is unlikely to go through because apparently there's a bad word about fossil fuels in there, and some countries are quite married to fossil fuels, so they may even veto it. So difference between COP and what we will be doing as public bodies, and I think that's the important message to take away. A, we want to do it because it's the right thing. B, we need to do it because it's the law. It is the law in Scotland. That stayed in even after the 2019 amendment. So the fact that nobody's come to a public body yet and said, just tell me how you're doing that, other than through our reporting mechanism, which we do with SSN, I think it's a situation that's waiting to happen. Final plug, SSN conference is on December the 8th. If you've tried to book, we opened it on Tuesday. It was full by Thursday, pretty much. So we're having a meeting tomorrow about how we can build more capacity. And it is a fully online, fully virtual conference, but we do still need capacity and working groups and things like that. So probably Monday, if you or your teams want to come back on board and have another look, we should have more capacity available there. I'm doing reasonably well, given that we overran slightly. So I'm now going to hand over to Andrew Griffiths, who is the Director of Community Partnerships from Planet Mark, who will just spend a couple of minutes talking about something also really good. I'm going to write better notes next time I do this.
Thank you. I'm painfully aware that I'm all that stands between you and food, which is always a very dangerous place to be in at the best of times. So I'm going to be very brief. But I'd like to start by just recognising all of you and what we've heard here today is incredible. We've been I'm from Planet Mark, and so we're a sustainability certification body, but the reason I'm here today is because we've been travelling all over the UK over the last 3 months on electric buses and hydrogen buses in different locations, and we've had the privilege really of coming and hearing stories and examples from local authorities, from organisations and communities of what's been happening, and that's built up to this crescendo at COP26. And I'd like to start by asking for a round of applause for the people in the Glasgow City Council, the councils surrounding the area who've all been playing a part in what we've experienced here over the past 2 weeks, the universities, the organisations, the institutions who have made this all possible. It's been remarkable to be here. It seemed on the surface very smooth, but I'm sure it's one of these things with the swan gracefully gliding across the water but paddling very hard underneath the surface. So can we just give a bit of recognition to those who have played a part in this? It's been really amazing. And so we've been travelling all over, and I wanted to share 3 reflections from things that we've experienced going and visiting places around Scotland and meeting with local communities. And in terms of how we achieve this just transition, because COP26 is a starting pistol, not a finish line. What we've been up to through now is the warm-up. And so with that starting pistol in mind, what 3 key reflections of things that we can do to build forward and to make progress? The first is around education. And that's been reflected on a number of times today. But one of the things that we've found throughout the tour is that often the people coming to events that we're hosting all about sustainability, people coming to events at COP26, we're preaching to the converted a lot of the time. And there are some phenomenal initiatives happening throughout Scotland, which we've visited and we've seen, which are really helping to reach the audiences of people who aren't necessarily switched on to this, don't realise the relevance that it will play out in their own lives. So things like fantastic initiatives like the community fridge in Dundee, you know, having 90 people a day coming into this place which doesn't have a stigma attached to it, because it's like a lovely little community shed with fridges in it which people can exchange stuff in and out of. They feed 1,500 people a week, and the people in that fridge have the opportunity to have conversations about climate change, about sustainability, about the role it's playing in our lives. Similarly, things like Climate Action Strathaven. I'm getting terrible at naming things. Strathaven, that's it. There you go. I'm reading it off the thing and getting it wrong again. Strathaven. So Climate Action Strathaven, which is embedded in the post office, you know, where they can have conversations with people on a daily basis. Dundee Cycle Hub, Bike Town in Rutherglen. These are places, again, where these conversations can take place, and so equipping people with those things. We've visited the Falkirk Wheel, Dundee and Glasgow Science Centres. All of these are amazing places where we can help people to understand what we're doing and spread the word. So please continue to do these things, continue to fund these initiatives, because this is how we get the public to come with us on these journeys. The second key area is around the role that local councils and local authorities can play in infrastructure and homes. And we've seen huge amounts of stuff going on, the facilitation of public transportation transitioning. You know, we've heard from Stagecoach, we've heard from McGill's, we've heard from all sorts of, and you know, in and around Glasgow, we're seeing all of these electric vehicles. The Royal Mail's rolled out all electric vehicles here. We want to see that expand far beyond Glasgow. And it is expanding. We've heard from Dundee, and we've charged all over in different places. And the charging infrastructure in Scotland is pretty good. I went on a trip up around Ben Nevis and stuff, and I did not have to worry about charging, because Scotland has really been doing quite a good job on electric charging infrastructure. There's more to be done, particularly with high-speed infrastructure for larger vehicles and things like that, but it's come a long way, and so keeping on doing that. The transition of social housing. We've seen that quite regularly throughout the UK as well. Swansea Council, for example, gave us some really good numbers on the costs, but also the benefits of they took EPC rated G properties to EPC rated A, and it cost them £85,000 per unit as part of that pilot, which is a lot. But the effect of that was it took the annual bills of people living in those houses from £1,200 per year to £400 per year, which is a huge change for someone who may be living in fuel or energy poverty. And so there are these huge opportunities that we have to drive, and local authorities pressuring, using that pester power with government to say, look, we've mapped it, we know what it costs, we need to get the economies of scale and have councils, regions and nations working together to put in mass procurement for heat pumps and things like that to bring those costs down for all of us. And then the final piece is that collaborative piece, and we've heard that time and time again today from everybody. The places we've seen where magic is happening is always where you're seeing local councils playing a central role in convening local businesses, universities, funding opportunities together and actively signposting, especially for SMEs. They do not have the resource often to proactively look for funding opportunities from government, from UK research, Innovate grants and things like that, Innovate UK. They don't have the time. And where we've seen councils going and looking for that funding, finding it, and then matchmaking it with local businesses and local groups, that's where the magic's happening. And so I'd encourage you to keep playing that role as you already are, and really drive things forward, because local councils have such a key role to play. So thank you for all that you're doing. Keep it going, and let's do more together. And you know, thank you for putting all of this on and making COP26 happen. It's been really incredible to be here.
Thank you, Andrew. That was excellent and well observed. I'd just like to please ask you now to thank our panellists, who I think have been superb. And obviously thank yourselves for actually turning up face-to-face or mask-to-mask and coming into a real live event. So thank you all very much. Lunch is ready. Please grab some of these guys. If you don't know them already, build networks. Pick their brains, find out what's worked and what's not worked, because the expertise in the room today is just tremendous. So thank you all for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a nice lunch and safe home. Thank you.
COP26 is well underway, and COSLA has been preparing for months to showcase the work of Scottish local government. COSLA supports an ambitious approach to tackling climate change and the national net zero emissions target set for 2045. We also strongly support the UN Paris Climate Agreement and its aims. Local government across Scotland has a strong track record at responding to climate change, and COSLA's COP26 campaign has aimed to demonstrate our commitment and the contribution to a just transition to a net zero economy and society. COP26 Glasgow is a unique opportunity to demonstrate the ambition and the extensive work of councils right across Scotland. However, we recognise that we live in a highly connected and globalised world, and that there are cross-boundary threats to the climate and to the environment. Scotland is a small country, but as one of the birthplaces of industrialisation, we have a responsibility to show leadership on this issue. What we do in our local areas can reverberate internationally. Equally, as local leaders, we know that our communities are impacted directly daily by climate change. COSLA is working closely with Scottish, UK, EU and international partners for an inclusive COP26 summit. We are also part of a broader coalition of local government organisations working together for a strong presence at COP26. To advocate for a stronger reference for devolved and local government in the delivery of international climate change commitments. We hope for a strong agreement at COP26, which is in line with keeping global temperatures as close as possible to the 1.5 degrees centigrade target, and for that agreement to recognise the role of local governments worldwide combating climate change. As President of COSLA, I would like to wish everyone participating in COP26 and the associated events a very good summit. Continue to follow us on Twitter with our hashtag LocalGovScot as we engage in COP26 this week, particularly on the Cities, Regions and Built Environments Day on November the 11th. And we welcome our friends and colleagues from all over the world to Glasgow for this summit.
Local government in Scotland is fully committed to combating climate change and supporting the just transition to a net zero society. We want ambitious agreement at COP26 in line with the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming target. We also want negotiators to better recognise local government's role in delivering international climate change commitments. In the countdown to COP26 in Glasgow, COSLA will be promoting the everyday actions of Scotland's councils in responding to climate change on our social media. Make sure that you follow us on Twitter, share your thoughts and take part in our campaign by using the hashtag #LocalGovScot.
Local authorities make and shape the places we live in and love. They're also working hard to decarbonise our built environment in so many ways. Planning is what brings it all together, guided by the vision of accessible and sustainable town centres, neighbourhoods and parks. Councils are leading the way when it comes to energy efficient homes, minimising heat loss through insulation and working with tenants on ways to maximise warmth in homes. Councils are also keen to ensure that we make the most of our existing resources and reduce, reuse and recycle as much as possible in a circular economy. You'll get a flavour of this work with the examples we have lined up this week, so remember to join our campaign and let us know what you think using hashtag #LocalGovScot.
This week, COSLA's COP26 campaign will focus on transport, heat and energy. All three sectors combined make up just over half of Scotland's emissions. Local authorities are working to help us reach net zero in these three areas. Clearly, there'll be a lot more to be done in years to come, however, councils are definitely up for the challenge. From shaping how we move around to how we heat our homes, from electric vehicles to hydrogen production, there's plenty of activity happening locally. Follow our campaign this week as we discover what councils are up to in transport, heat and energy.
This week, COSLA's COP26 campaign is focused on education, children and youth. Children and young people are our future. As education authorities, we owe it to them to do all we can to empower them to be the climate leaders of tomorrow. Local government has an important role in sustainable development education and awareness raising around climate change, but also in facilitating outdoor recreation, delivering outdoor learning and connecting young people and nature. Access to a healthy and clean environment, the right to a wide range of leisure and play activities, and the need for education to encourage respect for the environment are all international norms that COSLA is committed to. Follow the hashtag #LocalGovernmentScot campaign this week to see some of the local work councils are doing with children and youth to ensure they are represented and involved at all stages in our journey to a just net zero society.
This week our campaign will go wild, but in a good way, as we focus on adaptation, biodiversity and nature-based solutions. Nature can often help us to address wider outcomes ranging from climate change to public health and a green recovery from COVID-19. Local authorities are taking steps to harness the power of nature at a local level. This is part of their actions to respond to the climate emergency, but also to promote well-being and enhance biodiversity. Follow along to discover all the creative ways that local authorities are seeking to restore and work with nature. Also remember you can join the campaign using hashtag #LocalGovScot.
There's no doubt that achieving net zero will be a huge undertaking, and we'll need to set out a path towards creating a low-carbon economy and society for both a fairer and greener Scotland. Now, this will require resources that are both capital and revenue, as well as the right skills and a few changes to how we do business. Driving and supporting sustainable economic growth, regeneration and investment is at the forefront of Council's work, and we think you'll get a flavour of this through this week's case studies. This week we also celebrate Scottish Business Week 2021, which has been organised by Business Gateway in partnership with a number of our national and regional economic development agencies. The virtual festival will feature a whole dedicated day on how to start up and run a more sustainable business. Use the link above this video to register for Scottish Business Week, and remember to share all your thoughts on social media and join our campaign using the hashtag #LocalGovScot.
Local government is the sphere of governance closest to people, working with communities and local organisations every day to bring about change and to make the voices of people heard and matter. Many local policies have potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while delivering other community outcomes such as health co-benefits. For example, current public health reform aims to put more decisions directly in the hands of our citizens and support our local communities develop their own solutions to local health challenges. The impact of climate change on public health has never been clearer. How we recover from the current COVID crisis will be crucial in achieving our long-term climate objectives. In the week before COP26 begins in Glasgow, COSLA is promoting local projects developed with and for communities on social media with the hashtag #LocalGovScot. Participatory budgeting and other forms of citizen participation led by local authorities are, for example, fundamental for collaborative, inclusive and effective local climate action. Join us to see how local authorities are working with our local communities to deliver a just transition to net zero.
For the past 7 weeks, COSLA has been showcasing the excellent work that local authorities are doing to help us get closer to net zero by 2045. From district heating and peatland restoration to educating and empowering our young people, our campaign has clearly shown the commitment and the level of potential that sits with councils. It has shown that councils must be truly empowered to continue being catalysts for change locally. As highlighted in the COSLA blueprint, councils' local knowledge and experience were absolutely critical at the height of the pandemic, and these skills will continue to be needed to support and enable Scotland's journey to net zero. This is why COP26 is very important to us. As we will articulate in this and next week's tweets, we feel very strongly that any agreement coming out of COP26 must recognise the role of local governments worldwide in combating climate change. COSLA has been clear that continued engagement and collaboration with local governments is critical, both during and beyond COP26. We hope that you will continue to follow our campaign this week as COP26 gets underway in Glasgow. And remember that you can interact with the campaign using the hashtag #LocalGovScot.